Trash, my older brother spat, and a crisp little chime rang inside my skull. Ding! +10 to strength. Disgrace of the family, my stepmother hissed, flicking her wine at my face. Ding! +50 to wealth. I was kneeling in the mud in the center of the Reed family courtyard. The entire clan gathered on the marble steps above me to watch me get humiliated. And with every single insult, my level climbed. They thought they were stomping me into the dirt. In reality, they were racing each other to build me a throne. So please. I lowered my head so they wouldn't see the corner of my mouth twitch up. Please, don't stop. Let me back up a little, because if I just start with the part where I casually flip an entire dynasty upside down, you won't appreciate exactly how satisfying it is. 12 hours ago, I woke up in a body that wasn't mine. 1 second I was a completely ordinary guy scrolling my phone at 2 a.m., and the next, a tidal wave of foreign memories smashed into my brain like a runaway truck. I had transmigrated into the body of Ethan Reed, the officially designated punching bag of the Reed family, the wealthiest clan in Arcadia City. And let me tell you, the original owner of this body had lived a life so pathetic it made me want to crawl back out of my own skin. Ethan Reed was the youngest son of Arthur Reed, patriarch of the Reed Group. His birth mother, the first wife, had died when he was 6. 2 years later, Arthur married Evelyn, a scheming socialite who brought along her own son, Julian, from a previous relationship, and quietly, systematically, they had spent the next 15 years erasing Ethan from the family. His inheritance, quietly rerouted. His allowance, cut to nothing. His reputation, dragged through the mud at every gala until all of Arcadia's high society agreed on one thing. Ethan Reed was the trash of the Reed family. A stain. A joke. A boy who would inherit nothing and die forgotten. The original Ethan had swallowed all of it. He'd smiled through the insults, apologized when he was slapped, and clung to the belief that if he was just obedient enough, just quiet enough, one day his father would love him again. He'd even accepted an arranged engagement to Willow Knight, a girl who treated him like a disease, because Evelyn told him it was the only way to be useful to the family. That obedient doormat had died last night, choking on his own tears after Julian pushed him down the grand staircase and everyone laughed. And I had woken up in his place. But here's the part that made me want to cackle out loud. The moment those memories finished downloading, a semi-transparent blue panel bloomed in the corner of my vision like a video game HUD. You grow stronger from the scorn of others. Every insult, every act of humiliation, every ounce of contempt directed at you is converted into raw power. Warning: kindness gives you nothing, only their hatred feeds you. Current level, 1. Strength, 3, pathetic. Wealth, 0, broke. Charm, 5. Fortune, 1. Mystic energy, 0. I stared at that panel lying on my creaky little servant quarters bed in the worst room of a mansion the size of a stadium, and I started laughing so hard my ribs hurt. Do you understand what kind of jackpot I'd just hit? I had been dropped into a family of people whose entire personality was looking down on me. A stepmother who insulted me at breakfast. A brother who mocked me for sport. A fiancé who wouldn't be caught dead standing next to me. An entire clan of relatives who used me as a conversational punchline. In any other web novel, that would be a tragedy. For me, it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. They wanted to spit on me? Fantastic. Spit harder. I got out of bed, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the cracked mirror. Ethan Reed had a good face, actually. Sharp jaw, clear eyes, the kind of features that would look devastating once they lost that permanent kicked puppy expression. The problem was the aura. 15 years of being a doormat had bent his spine into a question mark. Time to fix that. I was halfway through combing my hair when my bedroom door banged open without so much as a knock. A maid stood there, and I recognized her from the memories. Doris, one of Evelyn's personal servants, a woman who had made a hobby out of, accidentally, spilling hot soup on the original Ethan. "Get up, garbage," she snapped, wrinkling her nose at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "The madam wants everyone in the main hall in 10 minutes. The whole clan is gathering. Don't embarrass the family more than you already do by being late." Ding! Garbage. +5 strength. A warm little current buzzed up my spine, and I felt my arms get, no exaggeration, physically stronger. I flexed my hand, and the knuckles cracked with a sound like breaking walnuts. I looked at Doris, and for the first time in this body's miserable existence, I smiled at her. Not a nervous smile, a slow, easy, genuinely delighted smile. "Thank you," I said warmly. Doris's face twisted in confusion. She'd expected me to flinch and stammer an apology like I always did. This unbothered thanks completely short-circuited her. "What are you smiling at, you freak? Did falling down the stairs finally scramble the last of your brain?" Ding! Freak. +5 strength. "Oh, keep going," I said, tilting my head. "Really, I'm all ears." She recoiled like I'd tried to bite her, muttered psycho under her breath, and fled. Ding! +5. I was practically glowing. I strolled toward the main hall in absolutely no hurry, savoring the walk through the Reed mansion. It really was obscenely grand. Imported marble, a chandelier the size of a small car, oil paintings of stern-faced Reed ancestors glaring down from gold frames. All of it currently in the hands of people who despised me. All of it, in a matter of time, going to belong to me. I could already feel it. In this world, I quickly learned from Ethan's memories, the ultra-wealthy weren't just rich. The truly elite families cultivated mystic energy, an inner force that made them faster, stronger, and longer-lived than ordinary people. It was the real reason the great clans ruled Arcadia. Money bought influence, but mystic energy was the blade behind the money. Julian, my dear older brother, was considered a prodigy, a Tier 3 practitioner at only 24. The original Ethan, meanwhile, had a mystic energy stat of exactly 0, a cripple, which was the final, unforgivable reason the family had written him off. My mystic energy was also currently 0, but I had a feeling that number wasn't going to stay 0 for very long, not with the buffet these people were about to serve me. I pushed open the towering doors of the main hall. Inside, it was already packed. 3 generations of the Reed clan filled the enormous room, dozens of aunts and uncles and cousins arranged by rank, all in designer suits and glittering jewelry. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat my father, Arthur Reed, a broad, iron-faced man in his 50s who hadn't looked me in the eye in years. To his right sat Evelyn, my stepmother, draped in emeralds, wearing the serene smile of a woman who owned the world. And beside her, lounging like he already owned the throne, was Julian. The moment I stepped through the doors, the buzzing conversation died. Every head turned. And then the whispers started, sharp and gleeful. "Oh look, the trash showed up." I heard he cried himself to sleep last night after tripping down the stairs. Tripping? Julian pushed him. Everyone saw. Serves the little parasite right. Ding, 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 ding. 4 notifications in 3 seconds just from walking into the room. I had to physically bite the inside of my cheek to keep a straight face. This was the greatest day of my life. "There he is!" Evelyn's voice cut across the hall, cool and elegant and dripping with contempt. "Ethan, how kind of you to grace us with your presence. Come here. Kneel." The room hushed with anticipation. This was clearly a well-worn ritual. The whole clan had gathered specifically to watch the trash grovel. The old Ethan would have scurried forward, dropped to his knees, and stared at the floor. And you know what? So did I. Because I'm not stupid. I walked to the center of the hall, right under the giant chandelier, and I sank to my knees on the cold marble. Gasps of satisfaction rippled through the crowd. Julian smirked. Evelyn's smile widened. But I wasn't kneeling because I was defeated. I was kneeling because I'd done the math. A boy standing defiantly might only earn a few scattered insults. But a boy kneeling in the dirt? That was a target. That was an invitation. Kneeling was going to make them comfortable. Kneeling was going to make them cruel. And cruelty, for me, was currency. Come at me, I thought, keeping my eyes lowered and my expression meek. Empty your whole clip. Louder now, everyone can see you, Evelyn said, rising from her seat and descending the platform steps, her heels clicking. She circled me slowly like a hawk. Do you know why the family is gathered today, Ethan? No, Mother, I said quietly. Don't call me that, she snapped. You are not fit to share a title with me. You are a stain your father was too soft-hearted to wipe away. A worthless, energyless cripple who has contributed nothing to this family but shame. Ding, ding, ding. Worthless, +10 wealth. Cripple, +5 strength. Stain, +5 charm. Oh, she was good. She was really good. That was a 5-star insult. 3 separate degradations packed into one breath. I felt my body drink it in like a man crawling out of a desert finding an oasis. Warmth flooded my limbs. My back straightened a fraction of an inch, and I forced it back down. We are gathered, Evelyn continued, raising her voice for the whole clan, to formalize the succession. Arthur and I have decided. Julian will be named the sole heir of the Reed Group. Applause broke out, polite and immediate. Julian stood and gave a little bow, soaking it in. "And you, Ethan," Evelyn turned back to me, and now her voice went soft and venomous. "You will sign away your birthright, every claim, every share, every last cent, in front of the whole clan, and then you will thank us for the privilege of having been fed and housed by this family, despite being completely useless." A murmur of approval. This was the entertainment they'd come for. An assistant hurried forward and placed a thick legal document and a pen on the floor in front of my knees. "Renunciation of inheritance," the header read. Now, the old Ethan would have signed it, weeping, and thanked them. Because the old Ethan was a doormat. I picked up the pen. I looked at the document. And then I looked up, straight into Evelyn's eyes, and I asked in the most innocent, pathetic voice I could manage, "Before I sign, may I ask one small question?" Evelyn's lip curled. "The trash wants to speak? How amusing. Go on, beg, grovel. Give the family a good laugh before you sign your worthless name." Ding! Worthless plus 10 wealth. "My question is," I said slowly, savoring it, "if I'm as worthless as everyone here keeps saying, why does it require the entire clan, a legal document, and my father's personal signature to take everything away from me? If I were truly nothing, wouldn't nothing be exactly what you'd need to bother with?" The hall went dead silent for half a second. Then Julian laughed, a sharp, ugly bark, and strode down from the platform. "Listen to it try to sound clever," he sneered, stopping in front of me and looking down his nose. "You always were a delusional little worm, Ethan, scribbling in your notebooks, pretending you'd amount to something. Let me make this simple for your broken little brain." He crouched down to my level, and his voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. "You are trash. You were born trash. You'll die trash. And no amount of clever words will change the fact that you're a spineless, energyless waste of a reed who should have died with your mother." Ding. Trash, spineless, energyless waste, plus 30 strength, plus 5 mystic energy. Level up. Ethan Reed is now level 2. First point of mystic energy acquired. The path opens. There it was, my first taste of mystic energy, and it came from the man who'd killed the original me. I felt it kindle in my chest, a tiny ember of golden warmth, and I nearly gasped from the sheer beauty of the irony. Julian had just handed me the very thing they'd all agreed I could never have. And he'd done it while gloating. I kept my head down and let my shoulders shake, and the whole clan assumed I was crying. I wasn't crying. I was trying very, very hard not to laugh. "Aw, look, it's crying again," someone jeered. "Just sign it, freak. We don't have all day. 15 years of eating our food, and this is the thanks. Sign and get out." Ding, ding, ding. The points rolled in. I set the pen to the paper, and then, in beautiful flowing script, I signed my name. Ethan Reed. Evelyn exhaled with satisfaction. Arthur, on his throne, finally looked at me, and there was nothing in his eyes at all, not even hatred, just cold, tired indifference, like he was watching a piece of furniture get thrown out. "Good," Evelyn said. "Now the thanks. Thank the family, Ethan. On your knees, forehead to the floor. Thank us for your worthless life." The crowd leaned in. This was the finale, and I gave it to them. I pressed my forehead to the cold marble, in a full kowtow, in front of the entire assembled Reed clan. "Thank you," I said, my voice muffled against the floor, and I meant every word with my whole heart. From the absolute bottom of my soul, you have no idea how grateful I am. They thought I was thanking them for their charity. They laughed. They applauded. Evelyn beamed. Julian smirked. My father turned away, already bored. They had no idea I was thanking them for the investment. Plus 65 strength, plus 80 wealth, plus 15 charm, plus 6 mystic energy. Level 2. Note, host has renounced all legal claim to the Reed fortune. System commentary. Good. You don't need their scraps. You're going to take everything. I stayed on the floor a moment longer than necessary, forehead down, and let the last few stray insults trickle in. Then I stood, brushed the dust off my cheap trousers, and walked out of the main hall with my head held just a little higher than I'd walked in with. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever notices the trash. That was fine. They'd notice soon enough. Outside in the corridor, I pulled up the system panel and grinned at it like an idiot. "Okay," I murmured. "New life, new rules. Rule 1. I never get angry at an insult again. Rule 2. I collect every single one. Rule 3. I looked back at the sealed doors of the hall, where I could still hear the muffled celebration of a family congratulating itself on destroying me. Rule 3. I make them do it in public, as loudly as possible, as often as possible, right up until the moment I take it all. The system chimed softly, almost like it approved. Objective updated, ascend. Let them build your throne, one insult at a time. I cracked my neck, rolled my newly strengthened shoulders, and went to find something to eat. A god needs his breakfast, after all. And somewhere behind me, in a mansion full of people who thought they'd just won, not a single one of them realized that the trash they'd spent 15 years spitting on had just started collecting the debt. Every last cent. By the time I finished a leisurely breakfast in the servants' kitchen, which the staff let me eat only because throwing out the leftovers was more effort than ignoring me, I had already made a decision. If insults were experience points, then I needed to go somewhere with a lot of people who hated me. Luckily, I had exactly that on my schedule. According to Ethan's memories, tonight was the engagement banquet. Not mine, technically. It had started as mine, an arranged match between me and Willow Knight to bind the Reed and Knight families together in business. But over the past year, Willow had made it painfully clear she'd rather marry a lamppost than marry me. And Evelyn, ever the opportunist, had quietly begun steering Willow toward Julian instead. Tonight's banquet was supposed to be a soft launch, a public event where Willow would be seen on Julian's arm, and my humiliating little engagement would quietly evaporate in front of all of high society. In other words, a ballroom full of Arcadia's cruelest elites, all gathered to watch me get publicly dumped and mocked. I could have wept with joy. I spent the afternoon doing something the original Ethan had never once done. I trained. I found an empty storage room in the East Wing, and I tested my new body. Level 2, strength somewhere north of 70 now. I pressed my palm against a solid oak crate, the kind that took 2 grown men to lift, and I pushed. It slid across the floor like it was on ice. I picked up a 50-pound dumbbell someone had abandoned and curled it one-handed without breaking a sweat. Then, carefully, I reached inward for that tiny golden ember of mystic energy Julian had gifted me, and I coaxed it to circulate the way the memories vaguely described. It flickered, weak but real, and warmth spread through my meridians. 6 points of mystic energy was nothing. A Tier 1 practitioner needed 100. Julian was Tier 3, which meant thousands. I had a long way to go. But I also had a family that would happily spend the entire evening insulting me in front of 500 witnesses. So really, how long could it take? That evening, I put on the one decent suit the original Ethan owned, a plain black number that had clearly been chosen to make him disappear into the background, and I took the servant shuttle to the Grand Knight Hotel. Nobody had offered me a car. Of course they hadn't. The banquet hall was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, ice sculptures dripping slowly under warm light, and 500 of the richest, most powerful people in Arcadia, all of whom knew exactly who I was and exactly how little I was worth. The moment I walked in, the whispers began. Is that the Reed trash? He actually came? How shameless. Doesn't he know Willow's going to be announced with Julian tonight? Poor thing doesn't have the sense to be embarrassed. Look at that cheap suit. Ding 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 ding. I stopped just inside the entrance and closed my eyes for a second, letting it wash over me like standing under a warm shower. 500 people, and easily 100 of them were sneering at me at any given moment. The passive income alone was staggering. I could feel the numbers ticking up in the corner of my vision, like a slot machine that only ever paid out. I grabbed a champagne flute off a passing tray, not to drink, just to have something to do with my hands, and I began to circulate through the crowd. And everywhere I went, the insults followed like a swarm of very generous bees. A cluster of young heiresses giggled behind their hands as I passed. Ugh, he's coming this way. Hide your drinks. Poverty might be contagious. Ding, plus 10 wealth. A drunk uncle from a rival family loudly announced, the Reed parasite crawled out of his hole. Someone get the exterminator. Ding, plus 10 strength. An old dowager sniffed and said to her companion, in my day we drowned the runts, which was genuinely dark. And also, ding, plus 15 mystic energy. Thank you very much, Grandma. By the time I reached the center of the ballroom, I had climbed to level 4, and my mystic energy had crossed 40 points. My skin was humming. Colors looked sharper. I could hear conversations across the room, like they were happening next to my ear. This was intoxicating in a way I didn't have words for. And then the music changed. The lights swung toward the grand staircase, and the announcer's voice boomed across the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daughter of the Knight family, Miss Willow Knight. She descended the stairs in a gown that probably cost more than a house, radiant and cold, drinking in the applause like it was oxygen. Willow Knight was beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful, all sharp angles and glittering edges. And on her arm, grinning like he'd already won the world, was my dear brother Julian. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, and Willow's eyes swept across the ballroom, found me standing there alone in my cheap black suit, and lit up with pure, gleeful malice. Oh no, she'd found me. Whatever would I do? She whispered something to Julian, who smirked, and the two of them descended the stairs and cut a straight line through the crowd, straight toward me, the whole ballroom turning to watch. This was the show. This was what everyone had come to see. The trash, publicly discarded. Willow stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, and she looked me up and down with theatrical disgust, making sure her voice carried to every corner of the silent watching room. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "I'm so glad you came. It saves me the trouble of tracking you down. I wanted to tell you, in person, in front of everyone, that our engagement is over. I could never marry a spineless, penniless piece of garbage like you." She tilted her head. "Honestly, I'd rather die alone than let you touch me. You disgust me. You've always disgusted me. Even standing near you makes my skin crawl. Ding ding ding. Compound insult, plus 40 wealth, plus 10 charm. Public humiliation multiplier active. Audience, 500. Bonus times 2. Plus 80 wealth. Level up, level 5. I had to physically stop myself from thanking her out loud. A public humiliation multiplier. The system rewarded me double when the scorn came in front of a crowd. Willow had just, in one breath, in front of 500 witnesses, handed me more raw wealth than the original Ethan had seen in his entire life. And she thought she was destroying me. The crowd was loving it. Someone laughed. Someone else called out, "Say something, trash. Defend yourself." Ding, plus 10. Julian slid an arm around Willow's waist and looked at me with lazy contempt. "What's the matter, little brother? Cat got your tongue? Or did you finally realize you were never in Willow's league? Never in anyone's league? You're a bottom feeder, Ethan. A leech. You've been living off this family's scraps your whole pathetic life, and now even the scraps are gone." He leaned in, lowering his voice for the crowd's benefit, but making sure they heard every word. "You have nothing. You are nothing, and you will always be nothing. Ding, 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 ding. Bottom feeder, plus 20 strength. Leech, plus 20 strength. Public multiplier times 2, plus 40 strength, plus 30 mystic energy. Level up, level 6. Mystic energy has crossed 100. You are now tier 1. Tier 1. Just like that. I'd crossed the first great threshold that separated ordinary humans from the elite, and I'd done it standing perfectly still in a ballroom while my brother monologued about how worthless I was. I felt the golden energy in my chest solidify, coil, and settle into a dense little core. My senses sharpened again. My exhaustion vanished. I felt, for the first time in this body, truly, physically powerful. And here's the thing about the moment your enemies hand you power while thinking they're taking it away. You get to choose exactly how and when to reveal it. And the answer, almost always, is not yet. Let them keep going. So I did the only sensible thing. I lowered my eyes, let my shoulders slump, and I said, in a small, wounded voice, "I understand. I'm sorry for coming. I'll leave." The crowd howled with laughter. Willow smiled triumphantly. Julian snorted. "That's right. Crawl back to whatever hole you came from. And Ethan? Don't come to my succession ceremony next week. Trash isn't welcome where important people gather." Ding, plus 20. Ding, public multiplier, plus 40. "Of course," I murmured, turning to go. "Thank you for being honest with me." I made it exactly 4 steps toward the exit before everything changed. Because that was the moment the entire ballroom fell silent, and not because of me. The great doors at the far end of the hall had opened, and a woman had walked in. She wasn't loud. She didn't have an announcer. She didn't need one. She moved through the crowd like a blade through silk, and every single person she passed instinctively stepped back, lowered their voices, straightened their spines. She was tall, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than the entire Reed estate, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes like chips of black ice. She was, without exaggeration, the most dangerous-looking person I had ever seen, and also the most beautiful, in a way that made your instincts scream danger and want at the exact same time. The whispers now were completely different, reverent, terrified. That's Valeria Knight. The Valeria Knight? The head of the Knight Consortium? I thought she was overseas. What is she doing at a family engagement banquet? Quiet, you idiot, if she hears you. Valeria Knight. The name detonated in Ethan's memories. The Knight family that Willow belonged to was just one branch, a wealthy but minor offshoot. Valeria Knight was the head of the true Knight bloodline, the Knight Consortium, a business empire so vast it made the Reed Group look like a corner store. She was a legend, the queen of Arcadia's business world, a woman who had taken over her family at 25 and turned it into the single most powerful commercial entity in the country. She was reclusive, ruthless, and so far above everyone in this ballroom that her mere presence had turned 500 arrogant elites into nervous children. And she was walking straight toward me. No, toward the confrontation, toward Willow and Julian and the scene they'd made. Of course, why would Valeria Knight have any interest in the trash? Willow's face had gone white. She dropped into a hasty, deep bow. Aunt Valeria, I didn't know you were coming, Valeria didn't even look at her. Her ice-chip eyes were fixed on me, on the trash, standing frozen 4 steps from the exit, in his cheap black suit. She stopped in front of me. The entire ballroom held its breath, and then Valeria Knight tilted her head, studied my face for a long, unreadable moment, and said, in a low voice that somehow carried to every corner of the silent hall, "You. I remember you. I remember you." 3 words, and the entire ballroom lost its mind. I searched Ethan's memories frantically and found it, buried and dusty. 2 years ago. Ethan had been sent on a pointless errand into the northern mountains, a punishment disguised as a chore, and he'd gotten caught in a landslide. He'd spent 3 days lost, half-starved, dragging himself down the mountain, and near the end, he'd stumbled onto a woman whose car had gone off the road in the same storm. Her driver was unconscious, her leg was pinned, and Ethan, this pathetic doormat everyone despised, had spent 6 hours digging her out with his bare hands, and then carried her 4 miles to the nearest village through the freezing rain. He'd never gotten her name. She'd been whisked away by a helicopter full of grim men in suits, and Ethan, being Ethan, had assumed she'd forgotten him the instant she was safe. He'd never told anyone. Who would have believed the trash saved anyone? That woman had been Valeria Knight, and she had not forgotten. "You dug me out of a mountainside with your hands until they bled," Valeria said, her voice quiet and absolutely certain. "And then you carried me down through a storm and refused to leave until you knew I was safe. And when I offered you anything you wanted as thanks, you asked for nothing. You just smiled and walked back into the rain." Her ice-chip eyes flicked, deliberately, to the cheap black suit, to my worn shoes, and then back to my face. "And now I find you here, being publicly humiliated by a Knight side branch nobody and a Reed second son, and told you are nothing. Nobody in that ballroom was breathing. Ding. Kindness given freely once, without expectation of reward, has returned. This is not from the system. This is fortune. Enjoy it." Willow made a strangled sound. "Aunt Valeria, you must be mistaken. That's Ethan Reed. He's nobody. He's trash. Valeria turned her head, slowly, and looked at Willow. I have never seen a human being physically shrink the way Willow Knight shrank under that look. The word trash died in her throat. Valeria said nothing. She didn't have to. The temperature of the entire ballroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Willow," Valeria said finally, in a voice like frost forming on glass, "you just called the man who saved my life trash. In front of 500 witnesses, at a banquet bearing the Knight name." She let that sit for a moment. "I will remember that too." Willow's knees actually buckled. Julian, to his credit, or rather to his complete lack of survival instinct, tried to salvage it. "President Knight, with all respect, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. My brother is, well, he's not the person you remember. Ethan is a cripple, an energyless embarrassment to our family. We've had to—" "Julian," I said quietly. He blinked. It was probably the first time in his life the trash had interrupted him. "Stop talking," I said. "You're embarrassing yourself." I wasn't being clever, I was being merciful, honestly, because I could see in Valeria's eyes exactly how close Julian was to ending his own family's fortunes with his mouth. But Julian, being Julian, mistook my mercy for insolence, and his face went red with fury. "You dare speak to me like, you worthless, energyless piece of— ding, ding, public multiplier times 2, plus 40. Garbage. I'll teach you your place right here, President Knight or not." And Julian, Tier 3 prodigy, golden son, drew back his fist and swung it at my face in front of the most powerful woman in the country. Here's the thing. 2 hours ago, that punch would have shattered the original Ethan's jaw. Julian was genuinely strong. A Tier 3 practitioner's strike could crack stone. But I wasn't the original Ethan anymore, and Julian and his family had spent the entire evening feeding me. Time seemed to slow. I watched his fist come, and it looked almost lazy to my newly sharpened senses. I didn't dodge. That would have been showing off. Instead, I simply raised my left hand and caught his fist in my palm. The sound it made was like a car door slamming. Julian's whole body jolted to a stop like he'd punched a concrete wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Julian stared at his fist, trapped in my grip, unable to move it even a millimeter. His smug expression cracked into confusion, then disbelief, then something close to fear. "What?" he breathed. "That's not... You're a cripple. You have no energy. This is impossible." Ding. Cripple. +10. Strength. "Thanks," I said, and I squeezed. Just a little. Just enough for the knuckles of his fist to grind together under my fingers. Julian let out a high, undignified yelp of pain and dropped to one knee, right there, on the ballroom floor, in front of everyone. The trash, holding the golden sun on his knees with one hand. 500 people made a sound like a collective gasp being sucked out of a room. I could have broken his hand. I wanted to, a little. But I looked past Julian's contorted face, and I met Valeria Knight's eyes, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Not shock. Amusement. A slow, cold, deeply interested amusement. Like a chess player who has just watched an unexpectedly good move. So instead of breaking his hand, I let go. Julian scrambled backward, cradling his fist, his face white as paper, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What did you... You're energyless. Everyone knows you're... Am I? I said mildly, and I let just a whisper of that golden Tier 1 energy rise to the surface, enough to make the air around me shimmer faintly, enough for every practitioner in the room to feel it. A wave of stunned murmurs rolled through the crowd. He has energy. That's not nothing. That's a real core. That's at least Tier 1. But the Reed family said he was a cripple, they said. They had said. For 15 years, the Reed family had told all of Arcadia that Ethan was an energyless waste. And now, in one moment, in front of everyone, that lie had shattered. I didn't confirm anything. I didn't explain. I just let them wonder. Because a mystery is so much more powerful than a fact. I turned away from Julian, who was still on the floor, and I inclined my head politely to Valeria Knight. "President Knight," I said, "I'm sorry you had to see that. It was good to see you again. I never expected you'd remember a nobody like me." I offered her a small, genuine smile, the first honest expression I'd worn all night. "I hope your leg healed well. Please, enjoy your evening. I was just leaving." And I turned to go. I made it 2 steps before her voice stopped me. "Ethan Reed." I turned back. Valeria Knight was studying me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Then, slowly, the corner of her mouth curved into something that on a lesser woman might have been called a smile, but on her looked more like the edge of a drawn sword. "You saved my life and asked for nothing," she said, "and tonight you were mocked, discarded, and struck at by your own family, and you absorbed all of it without a flicker of anger, like a man who knows something no one else in this room knows." She took a single step closer, and 500 people leaned in despite themselves. "I've spent my whole life reading people. It's how I built an empire, and I can't read you at all." She tilted her head. "That's the first interesting thing that's happened to me in years." She reached into her jacket, produced a matte black business card, and held it out. Not the card of the Knight Consortium, a private card, with nothing on it but a single phone number in silver ink. "Call me," she said. "I have a great deal I'd like to discuss with a man who grows calmer the more the world spits on him." Her eyes glittered. "I suspect we're going to be very good for each other." I took the card. Our fingers brushed for half a second. Behind me, I heard Willow make a small, broken sound of pure disbelief. I heard Julian breathing hard through his teeth. I heard 500 of Arcadia's cruelest elites recalculating, in real time, exactly how badly they had all just misjudged the trash. I slipped the card into my pocket, bowed slightly to Valeria, and walked out of the Grand Knight Hotel with my head high, leaving the entire ballroom in absolute chaos behind me. The valet, who 90 minutes ago would have sneered at me, tripped over himself to bring me a car. I didn't have a car. I told him I'd walk. He looked like he might faint. Out on the cool night street, alone, I finally let myself grin, and I pulled up the system panel. Level 8. Strength, 340, superhuman. Wealth, 400, charm 90, fortune 60, mystic energy 128, tier 1. Notable event, public reversal witnessed by 500 elites, reputation destabilized in your favor. System commentary, you held Julian on his knees with one hand and let him go. Restraint, good. A god who breaks toys immediately runs out of toys to break. Let them keep talking, there is so much more to take. I looked back at the glittering hotel, at the windows full of people who had spent the evening trying to grind me into dust, and who had instead spent the evening making me stronger than I'd ever dreamed. You heard the lady, I said softly to no one. We're going to be very good for each other. Then I put my hands in my pockets and walked home through the city I was going to own, absorbing 3 more insults from a group of drunk strangers who didn't like the look of my cheap suit along the way. Ding, ding, ding. Honestly, best night of my life. Now, while I was walking home collecting insults like loose change, let me tell you what was happening back at the Reed mansion, because this is the part that really makes it delicious. Evelyn Reed had left the banquet in a towering, silent rage, and by the time her car reached the estate, she had convinced herself of something that would have made me laugh out loud if I could have heard it. She had decided the whole thing was a trick. It's a con, she snapped, pacing the length of the family study while Julian slumped in an armchair nursing his bruised hand, and Arthur stood by the window with his arms crossed. That energy Ethan showed? It's borrowed. Bought. Some cheap talisman. Some one-time pill. There's no other explanation. The boy has been an energyless cripple for 21 years. You don't simply grow a tier 1 core overnight. She whirled on Julian. And you let that little rat put you on your knees in front of Valeria Knight and all of Arcadia. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family's face? Julian's jaw clenched. His pride was a bleeding wound. All his life he had been the golden son, the prodigy, and tonight, the trash he'd stepped on for 15 years had caught his fist like it was a child's slap and dropped him in front of the whole world. It didn't matter how it had happened. All that mattered was that it had happened, and everyone had seen. It won't happen again, Julian said through his teeth. Whatever trick he used, it changes nothing. He's still nothing, still trash, still landless, penniless, and hated by everyone who matters. Valeria Knight's little charity act doesn't give him a family, or a company, or an army. He's one man in a cheap suit. He's one man in a cheap suit whom the most powerful woman in the country just handed her private number, Arthur said quietly, without turning from the window. It was the first thing my father had said, and it landed like a stone in a still pond. The room went silent. You think Valeria Knight actually cares about him? Evelyn said slowly. I think, Arthur said, that Valeria Knight has never once in 20 years shown public favor to anyone. And tonight, she did it for a boy we told the entire world was worthless. He finally turned around, and his iron face was troubled. I think we should be careful. And here is where the Reed family made their fatal mistake. The mistake that every arrogant person in every one of these stories makes. The mistake I was counting on. Because Evelyn looked at her husband's caution, and instead of listening to it, she felt threatened by it. In her mind, Ethan was a threat to Julian's inheritance, and Evelyn had not spent 15 years methodically destroying that boy just to get nervous now. No, she said, her voice hardening into something cold and final. We don't get careful. We get rid of him. Permanently this time. Before this little Valeria fantasy grows legs. Before he can turn whatever this is into real power. She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. Julian's succession ceremony is in 1 week. The entire clan will be there, along with half of Arcadia's elite. We invite Ethan. We honor him, publicly, graciously. We give him a place of importance at the ceremony. Her smile widened. And then, in front of everyone, we expose him. We prove his energy is a fraud. We strip away Valeria Knight's little illusion. We humiliate him so completely, so publicly, so permanently, that no one, not even the Queen of Arcadia, would ever be seen near him again. And once he's crushed beyond recovery in front of the entire world, she let it hang. An accident becomes very easy to arrange. Julian's cruel smile returned. His bruised hand throbbed, and every throb fed his hatred. I like it, he said. Give the trash one last spotlight, and then turn off the lights forever. Even Arthur, after a long moment, gave a slow, reluctant nod. His caution had lost to his wife's ambition and his son's wounded pride, the way it always did. They spent the next hour planning it in loving detail. How they'd flatter me, How they'd lure me to the center of the ceremony. How they'd spring an energy verification test rigged to read me as a fraud. How they'd unleash every insult, every accusation, the whole clan and half the city all screaming their contempt at once, a tidal wave of public scorn crashing down on the trash in a single, coordinated, annihilating moment. They thought they were designing my execution. They were designing the single greatest power-up buffet I could possibly have asked for. If I had been a fly on that wall, I would have wept with gratitude. An entire ceremony, engineered from the ground up to concentrate the maximum possible amount of public contempt onto me in the shortest possible time, with a multiplier bonus for the size of the crowd. It was like my enemies had read the fine print of my system and decided to speedrun my ascension for me. But I wasn't a fly on that wall. I was in my little servant's room across the estate, and I found out about the plan the easy way. Because the next morning, everything changed. I woke up to a knock on my door. A polite knock. That had never happened once in the original Ethan's memories. I opened it to find the estate's head butler, a stiff old man named Jenkins, who had spent 15 years pretending I didn't exist, now standing there with a silver tray, a folded suit, and an expression of deep discomfort. "Master Ethan," Jenkins said, and the words visibly pained him. "The madam sends her, warmest regards. She wishes to inform you that you have been moved to the West Guest Wing, effective immediately. Your new rooms have been prepared, and she asks that you join the family for breakfast." He held out the suit, which was clearly expensive, clearly new, clearly a bribe. "A gift, to replace your, current attire." Ding! Kindness detected. Kindness gives you nothing. Be careful, host. When people who hate you are suddenly kind, it is because they have found a new way to hurt you. Their sweetness is bait. Ah, so the trap was already in motion. The old Ethan would have wept with joy at this crumb of acceptance. He would have put on the suit and cried at the breakfast table and thanked them. I, on the other hand, understood exactly what was happening. Evelyn had decided to fatten the pig before the slaughter. She was going to spend the next week being sweet to me, lulling me, positioning me, so that when the ceremony came and the trap sprang, the fall would be as far and as public as possible. Which meant, for 1 week, my family was going to stop insulting me. That was a problem. My income was about to dry up. But it also meant the ceremony was going to be an absolute avalanche of scorn. A week's worth of pent-up contempt, all released at once, with a crowd of thousands. I looked at the suit in Jenkins's hands, and I looked at his uncomfortable face, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them lull me for a week. I was going to spend that week getting stronger somewhere else. Somewhere with an even bigger supply. "Thank Evelyn for me," I said, taking the suit. "But I won't be at breakfast. Tell her I've, found a job." Jenkins blinked. "A job, sir?" I smiled and pulled a matte black business card from my pocket, letting him see the silver phone number on it, watching his old eyes go wide with recognition and disbelief. "A job," I said. "I'll be back in time for Julian's ceremony. I wouldn't miss it for the world." I called the number on the card from a payphone 2 blocks from the estate, because the original Ethan's phone was a cracked antique with no credit on it, another small humiliation I filed away for later. It rang exactly once. "You took 11 hours to call," Valeria Knight's voice said, cool and amused. "I was beginning to think you'd thrown my card away. That would have been the first genuinely disappointing thing you'd done." "I don't own a phone that works," I said honestly. "I'm at a payphone. It smells like regret and old gum." There was a pause, and then Valeria Knight did something Ethan's memories insisted was impossible. She laughed. A short, surprised, genuine laugh. "A car will be there in 6 minutes," she said. "Get in it." And she hung up. The car was a black Rolls-Royce with tinted windows and a driver who called me sir without a trace of irony, which, after a lifetime of Ethan's memories, felt like being handed a crown. It took me across the city, away from the Reed District and into the gleaming financial heart of Arcadia, to a tower of black glass that stabbed 120 floors into the sky. The Knight Consortium headquarters, the single most valuable piece of real estate in the country. The lobby alone was the size of a cathedral, and as I walked through it in my cheap black suit, still not wearing Evelyn's bribe, the whispers started up again. That familiar, wonderful music. "Who let that in here? Look at that suit. Did he wander in off the street?" "Security, why is there a vagrant in the executive lobby?" Ding, ding, ding. +10 wealth, +5 charm, +10 wealth. Oh, this place was going to be good for me. 120 floors packed with the most arrogant, status-obsessed, contemptuous people money could assemble. A gold mine. A severe-looking woman in a headset intercepted me before I reached the elevators. "Sir, this is a private building. If you don't have an appointment, I'll have to ask you to. Ethan Reed, I said. President Knight is expecting me. The woman's professional smile flickered. She clearly didn't believe me. President Knight does not take unscheduled visitors. Certainly not. Her eyes flicked over my suit. Walk-ins. I'll need you to leave before I call security. Ding. +10. You could do that, I agreed pleasantly. Or you could call up to her office and ask. I'll wait right here. If I'm lying, you can have security throw me out, and I'll have earned it. If I'm not lying, I smiled, you'll want to have made that call. Something in my calm made her hesitate. She stepped aside, murmured into her headset, and I watched her face go from skeptical to confused to bloodless white in the span of about 8 seconds. Mr. Reed, she said in a completely different voice, President Knight's private elevator is this way. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. Please, right this way. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? The mockery in the lobby died instantly as word rippled outward. But I'd already collected my toll, so I didn't mind. The private elevator opened directly into Valeria Knight's office on the top floor, a vast expanse of glass and steel with the entire city sprawled out below like a circuit board. And there she was, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window with a tablet in her hand, wearing a blood-red suit today, looking every inch the queen the world called her. You didn't wear the suit, she observed without turning around. The one your stepmother sent you this morning. Expensive. New. You're still in the cheap one. I stopped. How did you know about the suit? I know everything that happens in the Reed household by 9 each morning. She finally turned, and those ice-chip eyes pinned me. I've had eyes on that family for years. Sloppy operators, but occasionally useful. I know your inheritance was stolen. I know your mother's death was, let's say, conveniently timed. I know Evelyn has been engineering your removal for over a decade. She set down the tablet. And as of this morning, I know that Evelyn has suddenly, uncharacteristically decided to be kind to you. New rooms, fine clothes, a seat at the family table, 1 week before your brother's succession ceremony. Her head tilted. You know it's a trap. Of course it's a trap, I said. They're going to expose me at the ceremony, prove my energy's a fake, humiliate me in front of the whole city, and then arrange an accident. Evelyn's been planning it since last night. Valeria's eyebrow rose a precise millimeter. You know the details. How? I don't actually, I admitted. But I know how people like Evelyn think. Kindness from someone who's hated you for 15 years is never kindness. It's a longer knife. I shrugged. So I'd rather not sit around their table pretending to be grateful. I came here instead. Valeria studied me for a long, silent moment. Then she walked to her desk, pressed a button, and said, Send them in. A side door opened, and 6 men and women in immaculate suits filed in. Senior executives, I realized. The inner leadership of the Knight Consortium. Their eyes landed on me, on my cheap suit and my worn shoes standing in the sacred inner sanctum of their empire, and their faces went through a fascinating sequence of confusion, disdain, and barely concealed offense. President Knight, said the eldest of them, a silver-haired man with the bearing of a duke. We came as summoned, but I have to ask, who is this? The way he said this made the word land like a slur. Ding, +15. This, Valeria said, is Ethan Reed. As of this moment, he is a special advisor reporting directly to me, with full access to my personal projects. You will extend him every courtesy. The silence that followed was thunderous. President Knight, another executive, a sharp-faced woman named Alice, said carefully, With respect, this man is wearing a suit from a discount rack. His family has publicly disowned him. He has no degree, no experience, no standing. The financial press is already calling him the Reed charity case after last night. If word gets out that the Knight Consortium has taken on a disgraced nobody as an advisor to the president, the reputational— Alice, Valeria said softly. Alice stopped. Finish the sentence, Valeria said. I want him to hear it. Tell Mr. Reed exactly what you think of him. Alice's jaw tightened, but she was a proud woman, and pride, like ambition, is a beautiful weakness. She turned to me and let it out. Fine. Since you asked, President, I think he's a beggar in a borrowed suit. I think he's a gold-digging opportunist who saved your life once by dumb luck and has come to cash it in. I think he is unqualified, unimpressive, and beneath this institution. I think putting him anywhere near our projects is an insult to every person in this room who actually earned their place. Frankly, I think he's trash. Ding, 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 ding. Compound insult from a tier elite professional, plus 30 wealth. Bonus. Contempt from the competent tastes sweeter than contempt from the cruel. Plus 20 wealth. Plus 15 charm. Plus 10 fortune. Level up. Level 9. I felt my wealth stat surge past 1,000 for the first time, and something strange happened. A new prompt appeared, one I hadn't seen before. Wealth threshold reached, 1,000. New ability unlocked, appraisal. You can now perceive the true value and the hidden flaws of any financial asset, contract, or venture at a glance. Oh, that was interesting. I looked at Alice, who was breathing a little hard after her tirade, clearly expecting me to wilt. And I smiled at her, warmly, gratefully. Thank you, I said. That was genuinely helpful. Alice blinked. Excuse me? You're right that I have no degree and no experience, I said. You're wrong about the rest. But that's fine. You don't know me yet. I turned to Valeria. You didn't call these 6 in just to insult me. You wanted me to see them. Or rather, you wanted to see me see them. I looked back across the room, and now I let my newly unlocked appraisal wash over the space, and information bloomed in my vision like frost patterns. So let me guess. One of these 6 is stealing from you. The room went very, very still. Valeria's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Go on. I walked slowly down the line of executives, and the numbers and warnings unfurled in front of me for each one, their portfolios, their transactions, the hidden shapes of their finances laid bare by appraisal. 5 of them read clean, more or less, ordinary greed and ordinary ambition. But the 6th, a soft-spoken man named Gerald, who had said nothing at all, who had kept his eyes down and his hands folded, lit up in my vision like a warning flare. I stopped in front of him. You, I said quietly. For the past 3 years, you've been siphoning funds through a shell company in the Meridian Islands, disguised as consulting fees on the Halberd acquisition. About 400 million so far. You've been careful. You route it through 6 intermediaries, and you never touch it directly. But the timing of the consulting invoices matches the timing of the leaks that killed the consortium's bid on the Northwind deal last year. I tilted my head. You didn't just steal from her. You sold her out to a competitor. Gerald's soft face had gone the color of ash. That's slander. I've never... President Knight, you can't possibly believe this. This beggar walks in off the street and... Ding! Plus 10. Beggar. Keep going, buddy. Accuses a 20-year veteran of the consortium on the basis of nothing? He's making it up. He's a fraud, a con artist, a piece of gutter trash trying to... Ding, ding, ding. Plus 50. You keep insulting me, I said, almost gently, and I keep getting more sure. Funny how that works. I turned to Valeria. The Meridian Shell Company is called Blackthorn Consulting. The account numbers are in his personal cloud, in a folder labeled, and this is genuinely insulting to your intelligence, recipes. He was going to move the last 200 million out this Friday, before the quarterly audit, and then take early retirement in a country with no extradition treaty. I shrugged. You already suspected one of them. You brought me here to see if I was worth anything. So, was I? Valeria Knight looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at Gerald, whose legs had begun, very visibly, to shake. Alice, Valeria said pleasantly, you were saying he was unqualified? Alice, to her enormous credit, had the grace to look absolutely floored. Valeria pressed another button on her desk. 2 large men in dark suits entered. Take Mr. Gerald to conference room B, she said without ever raising her voice. Have legal and forensic accounting waiting. He is not to touch a phone. If Blackthorn Consulting so much as receives a login attempt in the next hour, I'll know he had a partner, and then I'll be having a much longer conversation with all 6 of you. Her eyes swept the remaining executives who had gone rigid. You're dismissed. Except Alice. The room emptied fast. Gerald was walked out white and silent, all his soft composure gone. And when the door closed, only 3 of us remained. Me, Valeria, and Alice, who was staring at me like I'd rearranged her entire understanding of reality. I owe you an apology, Alice said stiffly. It clearly cost her a great deal. You don't, I said. You were doing your job. You protected your president from what looked like a scam. That's loyalty. I'd rather have you skeptical and loyal than fawning and useless. I meant it, and she heard that I meant it, and something in her sharp face softened by 1 degree. Besides, I added, your insult unlocks something genuinely useful for me, so really, thank you. Alice opened her mouth, closed it, and finally just shook her head. You're a very strange man, Mr. Reed. So I keep getting told, I said. Valeria watched this exchange with that same slow, cold, deeply interested amusement. When Alice had gone, she came around the desk and stood in front of me, closer than a business meeting required. "You just found in 10 minutes what my internal audit missed for 3 years," she said. "You did it in a cheap suit, with no training, using an instinct I can't explain." She studied my face. "You're not a nobody, Ethan Reed. You're the most valuable thing in this building, and no one but me can see it yet." A slow smile. "I find that I quite like being the only one who can see it." "For now," I said. "For now," she agreed. "So here's my offer. Forget being an advisor. That was a formality to get you in the door. I want a partnership. You bring me whatever this is, this ability to turn everyone's contempt into an advantage, and I bring you the full weight of the Knight Consortium. Money, influence, protection, a seat at every table in this country. In 1 week, your family plans to destroy you at that ceremony." Her eyes glittered like drawn steel. "I say we let them try. And I say that when they do, we make it the single greatest mistake the Reed family has ever made. Together." I looked at the Queen of Arcadia, offering me an empire, 1 week before my enemies planned to bury me. And I thought about the ceremony, about Evelyn's plan to concentrate the maximum possible public contempt onto me in a single, coordinated, annihilating moment. About a crowd of thousands, all screaming their scorn at once, with a size multiplier. I thought about exactly how strong that was going to make me, and I smiled. "President Knight," I said, and held out my hand. "I think we're going to be very good for each other." The week before the ceremony was the strangest, most productive week of my life, and I intend to remember it fondly for the next 100 years. Valeria set me up in a penthouse she owned near the Consortium Tower, gave me an unlimited black card, a working phone, a wardrobe that made Evelyn's bribe suit look like a dish rag, and, most importantly, access to the Knight family's private cultivation resources. Because here was the thing my system did that no one, not even Valeria, fully understood yet. I didn't just get stronger from insults. The energy I gained was raw and unrefined, and if I channeled it into proper cultivation techniques, it compounded. The Knight family had spent generations collecting the finest cultivation manuals and spirit pills money could buy. In the original world, a Tier 1 practitioner might take 3 years of brutal discipline to reach Tier 2. I did it in 3 days. Because in addition to the manuals and the pills, I had a secret weapon Valeria couldn't have provided. I made a point of going out in public. Every single day. To the most exclusive, snobbish, status-obsessed places in Arcadia. In my nice new clothes, but carrying, always, an air of not quite belonging that the elite could smell like sharks smell blood. And they fed me. At a members-only club, an old money heir looked at me and said loudly, "Since when do they let charity cases in here?" Ding, plus 20. At a luxury car showroom, a salesman refused to let me test drive anything until Valeria's black card cleared, sneering, "People like you waste our time." Ding, plus 15. And then I bought the car, and then I bought the showroom, just to see his face, which was worth another chapter of pure joy. At a high society tea, 3 matriarchs spent 40 minutes dissecting my shameful background within earshot, and I sat perfectly still and let them power level me past a threshold I'd been stuck on all morning. I was, without exaggeration, farming. The best afternoon of that farming week, though, came at a consortium investment summit, where Valeria had, with a small, dangerous smile, seated me at the main table as her special advisor, and then leaned back to watch the fun. The room was full of Arcadia's business titans, and among them was a man named Philip Cross, a shipping magnate, old money, a longtime Reed family ally, and exactly the kind of pompous dinosaur who considered public rudeness a form of strength. He took one look at me sitting at Valeria Knight's right hand and decided, loudly, in front of 40 of the most important investors in the country, to put the trash in its place. "President Knight," Cross said, swirling his brandy, "I have to say, I question the company you're keeping these days. The Reed boy? The one the papers call the charity case? Half of Arcadia thinks you've lost your judgment. You don't build the country's greatest fortune by seating gutter trash at the grown-ups' table." He chuckled, and a few sycophants chuckled with him. "No offense, boy, but you're a mascot, a rich woman's pity project. You've got no business instinct, no pedigree, no idea how real money works. Sit quietly, look pretty, and let the men talk. Ding, ding, ding." Gutter trash, mascot, pity project. Plus 70 wealth. Bonus, he did it in front of 40 investors. Public multiplier, plus 70. "Thank you, Mr. Cross," I said warmly. "Genuinely, that was very generous of you." And then, Because Valeria had given me the table and I intended to use it, I let my appraisal drift across the man's finances, and I smiled. But since you've invited me to demonstrate whether I understand how real money works, let me. Your flagship venture, the Meridian shipping expansion, the one you're here to raise capital for, you're telling this room it's a sure thing. 12% guaranteed returns. I tilted my head. It's insolvent. You've been quietly rerouting operating capital to cover losses in your other divisions for 18 months, and your Meridian books are held together with related party loans you don't disclose. Your guaranteed 12% is being paid out of new investors' principal. That's not a shipping expansion, Mr. Cross. That's a Ponzi scheme with a boat. The room went dead silent. Cross's brandy stopped mid-swirl. His face drained of color, then flooded red. That is slander, you insolent little... You have no proof. You're a nobody. You're... Ding, ding. Plus 60. Oh, keep going, Philip. The proof is in your own disclosures, cross-referenced against your subsidiary's filings, I said calmly. Anyone at this table can see it in 10 minutes now that they know where to look. Which they will, the moment this meeting ends, because every person in this room just heard you promise them a guaranteed return that's mathematically a fraud. I looked around the table at 40 of the most powerful investors in the country, all of whom were now staring at Philip Cross like sharks who just smelled blood in their own tank. I'd get your affairs in order, Mr. Cross. Quickly. The mascot's done talking. Philip Cross did not raise another dime that day. Within a month, the Meridian venture collapsed, the regulators moved in, and the Reed family lost one of its oldest and wealthiest allies right before it needed all the friends it could get. Cross, I heard, blamed me bitterly to anyone who'd listen, calling me trash right up until the day his assets were frozen. Ding, 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 all the way down. Valeria, that afternoon, watched me dismantle a titan with nothing but a smile and the man's own contempt. And when the meeting ended, she leaned close and murmured, "You realize you just did in 5 minutes what my analysts couldn't do in a year." Again. Her sword-edged smile. "I'm going to have to stop being surprised by you. It's becoming inefficient." "Don't stop," I said. "I like surprising you." She said. "I like it too," which is deeply annoying. But the real jackpot came 4 days before the ceremony, at the Arcadia Charity Gala auction. It was the social event of the season, and half the reason I went was because I knew, from the guest list Valeria's people pulled, that Julian and Willow would be there. Julian was still nursing his wounded pride from the banquet, and Willow was still clinging to him, having correctly calculated that being publicly dumped by the Reed trash and then adopted by Julian was better for her image than whatever was happening with me and Valeria Knight. I arrived alone, which was deliberate. Valeria had offered to come, but a queen on my arm would have scared off the scorn. I needed them comfortable. I needed them cruel. The moment I walked into the auction hall, I saw them. Julian in a white dinner jacket, holding court among a circle of sycophants. Willow glittering beside him. And the instant they spotted me, in my perfectly tailored suit, walking in like I belonged, Julian's face curdled. "Look who crawled out of the gutter," he announced, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "The family charity case. Nice suit, Ethan. Did Valeria Knight buy it for you? Is that what you are now? A rich woman's little pet? A kept man?" Ding, ding, ding. Charity case, pet, kept man, plus 45 wealth. Public multiplier times 2, plus 90. I felt my wealth stat crest 4,000, and I nearly sighed with contentment. "Julian," I said warmly, "good to see you too. Enjoying the party?" "Don't talk to me like we're equals," he snapped. "One lucky trick at the banquet doesn't change what you are. You're still nothing. You'll always be nothing. Valeria Knight will get bored of her little charity project in a week, and then you'll be right back in the gutter where you belong." Ding. Plus 40. The crowd around us was tittering now, drawn to the spectacle. "You're probably right," I said mildly, and drifted past him toward the auction floor. The centerpiece of the night was a rare item that had the whole hall buzzing. A spirit jade pendant, a genuine cultivation treasure said to accelerate energy refinement, one of only a handful in existence, the kind of item great families went to war over. Julian, I knew from his memories and his ego, desperately wanted it. It would be the perfect trophy to display at his succession ceremony, proof of the family's wealth and his own ascendance. The bidding opened at 10 million. It climbed fast. 20, 30, 50. The old families threw numbers around like confetti. Julian entered at 80 million, standing to make sure everyone saw him, and Willow clung to his arm looking thrilled. 100 million, Julian called with a flourish, clearly expecting to close it out. The auctioneer looked around. 100 million, going once? 500 million, I said without standing up. The hall went silent. Every head turned to me. Julian's face went from triumphant to furious in a heartbeat. You don't have 500 million, he spat. You're a beggar living off a woman's charity. Sit down before you embarrass yourself, trash. Ding, ding. Beggar, trash. Plus 40 wealth. Public times 2. Plus 80. Verify my bid then, I said to the auctioneer, and slid Valeria's black card across to a nearby attendant. The attendant ran it, and I watched his face perform the now familiar transformation from skepticism to bloodless awe as the card came back with no limit, backed directly by the Knight Consortium. He whispered to the auctioneer, who straightened and cleared his throat. The bid of 500 million is confirmed. And most generously backed. Do I hear 510? Julian's jaw worked. 500 million was already far beyond what his personal accounts could reach. He'd have to go to Arthur, and going to his father to fund a bidding war he'd started out of spite in front of the whole city would be its own kind of humiliation. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. 550, he ground out. I didn't even look at him. 1 billion, I said. Gasps rippled through the hall. Willow grabbed Julian's arm. Julian, don't. It's not worth it. Everyone's watching. Shut up, Julian hissed at her, and I watched, delighted, as her face flickered with hurt. Trouble in paradise. Excellent. 2 billion, Julian snarled, throwing a number so large it committed him to begging his father for months. I finally turned and looked at him, and then, with the whole auction hall watching, I smiled, picked up my paddle and said, 3 billion. And Julian? I could do this all night. My wife's card doesn't have a limit. The word wife hung in the air. I hadn't cleared it with Valeria, but the look on Julian's face and the ripple of scandalized delight through the crowd was worth whatever conversation that would require later. 3 billion, going once, the auctioneer said, practically vibrating. Going twice. Sold to Mr. Ethan Reed. The hall erupted. Julian stood frozen, his paddle limp in his hand, his white dinner jacket suddenly looking like a costume, his face cycling through red and white and a sort of greenish gray. He had, in front of all of Arcadia's elite, gotten into a bidding war with the trash, and lost. Humiliatingly, publicly. And it had cost him nothing but his dignity, while it had cost me a treasure I actively wanted. You, Julian choked. You think money makes you something? You think one lucky night with Valeria Knight makes you a Reed? You're a fraud, Ethan. A borrowed suit and a borrowed card and a borrowed woman. Underneath it all, you're still the same worthless, spineless, energyless piece of gutter trash you've always been. And next week, the whole world is going to see it. Ding, 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 ding. Public multiplier times 2. Plus 200 across all stats. Level up, level 12. Mystic energy has crossed 1,000. You are now tier 2. There it was. Julian, in his fury, had just power leveled me straight through tier 2 in the middle of a charity gala. I could feel the golden core in my chest expand and densify, could feel my body flood with a strength that made the tier 1 me from a week ago feel like a child. I was now, formally, on Julian's own level, and climbing. But he'd said something in there, without realizing it, that I filed away carefully. Next week, the whole world is going to see it. He'd all but confirmed the ceremony trap, right there, in his rage. Their arrogance really was the gift that kept on giving. I collected the spirit jade pendant, thanked the auctioneer, and paused on my way out to lean close to Julian, just for a second, my voice low enough that only he could hear. Keep talking, brother, I murmured. Every word makes me stronger. You'll understand what I mean very soon. I straightened and smiled at him, bright and genuine. See you at your ceremony. I promise I'll make it a night no one forgets. And I walked out, 3 billion poorer and immeasurably richer, leaving Julian Reed staring after me with the first real seed of fear taking root in his chest. He didn't understand it yet. He just knew, on some animal level, that something was wrong. That every time he attacked me, he came away weaker and I came away stronger. That the more he tried to grind me down, the taller I stood. He didn't understand it, but he would. The Reed family did not. Take the auction well. I found this out around midnight, on my way back to the penthouse, when 4 men stepped out of the shadows of a parking structure and made the single worst financial decision of their lives. They were practitioners, low tier but professional, the kind of muscle a desperate family hires when it wants a problem to have an accident. The one in front, a broad man with a scarred jaw and a cheap talisman glowing at his wrist, cracked his knuckles and smiled at me the way predators smile at something small. Ethan Reed, he said. You've embarrassed some very important people today. Word is you got lucky at a banquet. Word is you've got a little talisman trick, a little borrowed energy. He drew a short, ugly blade that hummed with cheap enchantment. We're here to find out how much is real. My employer wants you to understand your place. Broken, in a hospital, reflecting on your choices. He looked me up and down and sneered. Look at you, rich suit, no spine. A soft little kept man playing at being a reed. You're nothing, kid. You're a stray dog who wandered too far from his gutter, and we're the pound. Ding ding ding. Nothing, stray dog, plus 90 wealth. Nighttime ambush multiplier. Your enemies always feed you when they think no one's watching. Plus fiction. I actually side with contentment. The best insults I'd learned come from people who are absolutely certain they've already won. There's a particular richness to the contempt of a man who thinks he's about to break you. It's the difference between boxed wine and a vintage. Let me save us both some time, I said pleasantly, hands in my pockets. I know who sent you. The Reed family. Probably Julian, acting alone, because Evelyn's too careful to authorize something this clumsy so close to the ceremony. He's furious about the auction, his pride's bleeding, and he wants me hurt tonight, quietly, off the books. I tilted my head. How am I doing? The scarred man's smile flickered. Doesn't matter what you know. Grab him. The other three moved. And I'd like to tell you it was a fight, but it wasn't. Not really. 2 weeks of the finest contempt money couldn't buy had made me a Tier 2 core, piloted by someone who devoured the Knight family's combat manuals. And these 4 were third-rate hired muscle. The first one reached for my collar, and I caught his wrist, and I felt the bone give under my grip like a dry twink. He screamed and folded. The second swung a fist wreathed in cheap talisman light, and I leaned under it and tapped him, just tapped him, in the sternum with 2 fingers, and he flew backward into a concrete pillar hard enough to crack it. The third took one look and turned to run, and I let him get 3 steps before I appeared in front of him, which was a new trick I'd been testing, and the look on his face when I was suddenly just there was worth another chapter of my life. That left the scarred leader, blade shaking now, all his professional confidence draining out through the soles of his shoes. That's not possible, he stammered. You're supposed to be... Trash, I offered. A cripple? Nothing? A stray dog? With each word, I stepped closer, and he stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall. You said all of that already. Thank you for it, truly. But here's where the night gets interesting for you. I plucked the humming blade out of his nerveless hand and crushed it into glittering dust, the way I was starting to make a habit of. You have exactly 2 futures available. In the first, you keep quiet, go back to Julian, and tell him you couldn't find me. And a week from now, when I take everything from him at his own ceremony, he goes down and you go down with him as a loose end he can't afford. I smiled. In the second, you work for me. Starting tonight, you go back to Julian, you tell him the ambush failed, and you become my eyes inside whatever he plans next. And when the ceremony comes and the Reed family falls, you walk away clean, employed, and forgotten in the best possible way. I let that sit. One future ends with you in a shallow grave dug by a man too proud to leave witnesses. The other ends with you having a boss who rewards loyalty and never ever needs to raise his voice. Choose. The scarred man looked at his 3 groaning colleagues. He looked at the dust that used to be his enchanted blade. He looked at me, calm and unhurt, in a suit worth more than his life, and he made the smart choice, the way frightened men usually do when you give them a door instead of a wall. Yes, he breathed. Yes, I'll tell him it failed. I'll tell you everything he does. Just, please. Good man, I said, and I meant it, because a god should reward good decisions. Get your friends to a doctor. Tell them they lost a fight with a stray dog. I'm sure they'll appreciate the irony eventually. He fled, dragging his moaning companions, and I strolled the rest of the way home whistling. Because Julian had just handed me 2 gifts in one night, a lovely bouquet of nighttime contempt and a spy in his own camp. 3 days before he and his mother sprang their grand trap, I now had a man on the inside who would tell me every detail of it, which meant that when the ceremony came, and the rigged crystal, and the grandmaster, and the coordinated avalanche of 10,000 voices, I'd walk into all of it knowing exactly what was coming. Not that I needed the warning, but it's always nice to know precisely which gift you're about to be handed, and precisely how large. That night, back at the penthouse, Valeria was waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch with a glass of red wine and her tablet, and she didn't look up when I came in. You spent $3 billion of my money on a pendant, she said. I did. And you told all of Arcadia I was your wife. I paused. I did do that, yes. She set down the tablet and finally looked at me, and I braced for the ice. Instead, her mouth was curved into that faint, dangerous, sword-edged smile. The financial press is in a frenzy. Half of them think we've been secretly married for months. The Knight Consortium stock is up 4% purely on speculation. She swirled her wine. You accidentally executed a more effective piece of strategic messaging than my entire PR department has managed in a year. A pause. Also, you called me your wife, in front of the man who spent 15 years torturing you, specifically to watch him choke on it. Which, I'll admit, I found unreasonably satisfying to hear about. I sat down across from her. I'll issue a correction if you want. Say it was a slip. No, Valeria said, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard before, something almost careful. Don't. She looked at me over the rim of her glass. I've had 100 men try to marry me for my empire. Every one of them looked at me and saw a merger. You looked at a stranger dying in a landslide and dug until your hands bled, and then walked away without asking for a thing. She set the wine down. Do you know how rare that is in my world? A person who does something for nothing? I'm not the person who did that, I said quietly, and it was as close to the truth as I could get. Not exactly, but I'd like to be. Valeria studied me for a long moment, that unreadable, dark gaze. Then she stood, crossed the room, and did something that startled me more than any insult ever had. She reached out and very lightly brushed her thumb across my knuckles, over the faint old scars the original Ethan had earned digging her out of that mountain 2 years ago. These healed badly, she said softly. You never had them treated. Trash doesn't get doctors, I said. Her jaw tightened, not at me, at the word, at the world that had made it true. You're not trash, she said. You never were. And when we're done, everyone who ever called you that is going to spend the rest of their lives regretting it. She withdrew her hand, and the queen slid back into place over the woman-like armor. Get some rest. In 4 days, we take everything back. And Ethan? She paused at the door to her own wing. The wife thing. We'll revisit it when this is over. She left, and I sat there for a long moment, and for the first time since I'd woken up in this body, I felt something that had nothing to do with the system. Something warm and terrifying and entirely my own. Then the system chimed, gently, almost smug. This warmth is real. Guard it. Kindness gives you no power, host, but it may give you something better. Now, while I was busy falling for the Queen of Arcadia, let me tell you what the Reed family was doing 4 days out from the ceremony, because they had escalated in a way that was going to make the climax truly spectacular. Evelyn had heard about the auction. Of course she had. And instead of taking it as a warning, she took it as a threat, which meant she took it as fuel for her plan. 3 billion, she snarled, pacing the family study for the second time that week. He humiliated Julian for $3 billion of Knight money and called that woman his wife. Do you understand what this means? Valeria Knight isn't playing charity. She's backing him, which means the ceremony has to work. It cannot fail. Whatever this energy trick of his is, we crush it so completely that Valeria Knight cuts him loose the same night. His energy isn't a trick anymore, Arthur said heavily. He'd had people at the auction. The verification at the bank read his backing as genuine, and my people say he moved through that hall like a tier 2. Evelyn. 2 weeks ago, he was energyless. Now he's tier 2. That's not a talisman. That's not a pill. I've never seen anything like it. We need to understand what's happening before we... What's happening, Evelyn cut him off, is that our enemy is getting stronger every day we hesitate, which is exactly why we don't hesitate. She turned to Julian. You couldn't beat him. Fine. So we bring in someone who can. She slid a photograph across the desk. Julian picked it up. The man in the photo was old, gaunt, with iron gray hair and eyes like a hawk. Who is this? Grandmaster Maxim Steele, Evelyn said. A tier 4 cultivator. A blade master of the old school. He owes the Reed family an old debt, and I've called it in. Her smile was thin and cruel. At the ceremony, after we expose Ethan's fraud, after we turn the whole crowd against him, Magnus will challenge him. Publicly. A duel of honor to settle whether the trash is fit to bear the Reed name. And when a tier 4 grandmaster shatters a tier 2 pretender in front of the entire city, she spread her hands. Well, these things are dangerous. Accidents happen in duels all the time. And no one, not even Valeria Knight, can object to a man dying in a challenge he accepted. Julian's cruel smile returned, brighter this time, all his wounded pride rushing back. A tier 4. Against Ethan. There's no trick in the world that closes 2 whole tiers. He set the photo down. He'll die on his knees, in front of everyone, and it'll be perfectly legal. Even Arthur, after a long, troubled silence, gave a slow nod. His caution had lost again. And I want to be clear about something, because this is the part that makes the whole thing sing. Evelyn thought she was building a wall 2 tiers high that no amount of my tricks could climb. A Tier 4 Grandmaster, insurmountable, undefeatable. She had no idea she was building me a ladder. Because a Tier 4 Grandmaster, publicly challenging me, in front of the largest and most hostile crowd of my life, was going to insult me, extensively, with the full contempt of a man who considered me an insect. And every ounce of that contempt, in front of thousands of witnesses, with the public multiplier active, was going to pour into me like a river into the sea. They were going to hand me the very tier I needed to beat them, and they were going to do it with a bow. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. Meanwhile, there was one person in the Reed camp who was beginning very quietly to have doubts. And that person was Willow. After the auction, Willow had gone home and sat in front of her mirror for a long time. She'd watched Julian snap shut up at her in front of the whole city, and she'd felt it. That first hairline crack in the fantasy. She was a calculating girl, Willow, always had been, and she was beginning to run the numbers, and the numbers were starting to frighten her. Because she had dumped Ethan, publicly, cruelly, calling him trash to his face in front of 500 people. And then, Valeria Knight, the most powerful woman in the country, had walked in and called that same trash the man who saved her life. And now that trash was throwing around billions and calling Valeria Knight his wife. Willow had bet everything on Julian, on the golden sun, the sure thing, and for the first time, she was starting to wonder if she'd bet on the wrong horse. If maybe, just maybe, she'd thrown away a diamond because everyone had told her it was a rock. She would spend the next 4 days telling herself she'd made the right choice. She was wrong, of course, but she'd figure that out at the ceremony, along with everyone else. The day of Julian's succession ceremony arrived, and it was, I have to admit, a masterpiece of a trap. I could appreciate it as a craftsman appreciates good work, even while I fully intended to turn it into the instrument of their destruction. The Reed family had rented the Grand Coliseum, an enormous open-air amphitheater in the heart of Arcadia that seated 10,000 people, and they had filled it. Every great family, every business titan, every socialite and official and journalist who mattered. 10,000 of the most powerful and status-obsessed people in the country gathered under the open sky to watch the crowning of the golden sun, and to watch the ruin of the trash. I arrived in a black car Valeria had sent, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's houses, and the moment I stepped out, the cameras found me and the whispers rose like a tide. 10,000 people. Even the ambient background contempt of that crowd, the muttered, "There's the charity case," and "Can't believe he had the nerve to show up," and "Gold-digging little leech," was a steady, glorious rain of points. I could feel my stats ticking up just from walking to my seat. Contempt field detected. Passive income active. Crowd size, approximately 10,000. This is going to be a good day, host. And then the trap began to spring, exactly as I'd predicted, with kindness. Evelyn met me at the entrance to the family section, radiant in silver, and she took my hands in hers like a loving mother. "Ethan," she said, warm and gracious, loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear, "I'm so glad you came. You know, whatever's happened between us, you're still family. Come, we've saved you a place of honor, right at the front." The old Ethan would have wept at those words. I let her lead me to the front, to a seat at the very edge of the central platform, in full view of all 10,000 people and every camera in the amphitheater. The perfect stage, the perfect spot to be exposed. I sat down and thanked her sweetly and settled in to wait, because I knew exactly what was coming, and I wanted them to think they'd caught me. The ceremony proper began. Arthur Reed rose and gave a speech about legacy and worth and the future of the family. Julian was called forward in ceremonial robes, and the crowd applauded the golden sun. It was all very grand, very dignified, very carefully designed to make what came next as humiliating as possible by contrast. And then Evelyn stepped to the microphone, and her voice went sorrowful and solemn, and the trap closed. "Before we complete the succession," she said, "there is a painful matter. The family must address, publicly, honestly, as is our tradition." She turned, slowly, and pointed at me. "My stepson Ethan has recently made extraordinary claims. That he, an energyless cripple his entire life, has somehow become a Tier 2 practitioner in the span of 2 weeks. He has used these claims to deceive the Honorable Valeria Knight, to embarrass this family, to throw around money that isn't his. Her voice sharpened. The Reed family will not be built on a lie. So, in front of all of Arcadia, we will settle it. Ethan, come forward. Submit to a public energy verification. Prove your claims are real. Or confess, before the whole world, that you are exactly what you've always been. A fraud. A cripple. Trash. Ding, ding, ding. Multiplier times 2. 10,000. Plus 150 across all stats. The whole amphitheater leaned in. This was the show they'd come for. 10,000 people, whispering, sneering, hungry for the trash to fall. I stood. I walked to the center of the platform, to the ceremonial energy verification array, a large crystal formation that glowed according to a practitioner's tier. And I already knew, because I'm not an idiot, that Evelyn had rigged it. Her technicians would have tuned it to read me as energyless no matter what I actually was. The plan was airtight. I would place my hand on the crystal, it would stay dark, the crowd would erupt in scorn, and the fraud would be exposed before 10,000 witnesses. So I did exactly what they wanted. I placed my hand on the crystal, and it stayed dark. Nothing. No glow. The array read me as completely energyless. The amphitheater gasped, and then, on cue, the contempt broke over me like a tidal wave. He is a fraud! I knew it, energyless trash. He lied to Valeria Knight's face. What a con man! Cripple, beggar, liar! Throw him out! He shamed the whole city! Ding, 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 ding. 10,000 sources, coordinated, public multiplier times 2, sustained. Plus 2,000 across all stats and climbing. Plus 3,500. Plus 5,000. Level up. Level 15. Level 16. Level 17. Mystic energy surging. I stood there with my hand on the rigged crystal, head bowed, letting 10,000 people scream their hatred at me all at once, and inside, I was ascending so fast the numbers were a blur. It was the single most intense sensation of my entire life. Every insult, every jeer, every cruel laugh from 10,000 throats poured into me and refined into pure, dense, golden power. I could feel my core, already tier 2, swelling, straining, pushing toward the next threshold. I felt like a dam about to break in the best possible way. Evelyn's voice cut through the roar, triumphant, vicious. There you have it, energyless, a fraud. The crystal doesn't lie. She was practically glowing with victory. Ethan Reed, you have deceived this family and this city for the last time. You are stripped of the Reed name. You are cast out. And, her eyes gleamed as she prepared to spring the second half of the trap. Since you have insulted the honor of this family with your lies, that insult must be answered. Grandmaster Steele. From the far end of the platform, the old man from the photograph rose. Grandmaster Magnus Steele, Tier 4 Blademaster, gaunt and hawk-eyed, radiating an aura of cold power that made the whole crowd shiver. He walked to the center of the platform, drew a long, thin, gleaming sword, and pointed it at my chest. Boy, Steele said, his voice carrying across the silent amphitheater, dripping with the contempt of a man who had spent 60 years above ordinary people. You have soiled a great name with your lies. As a matter of honor, I challenge you to a duel. Here, now, in front of all these witnesses. His thin lips curled. Though calling it a duel flatters you, you are an energyless worm challenging a grandmaster. This will not be a fight. It will be an extermination. I will carve the arrogance out of you, trash, and when I am done, no one will remember your name at all. Ding, 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 ding. Tier 4 source. Public multiplier times 2. Crowd, 10,000. Plus 800 across all stats. A grandmaster's scorn is worth 100 commoners. Savor it. Oh, I savored it. I savored it like the finest wine. The crowd was screaming again now, 10,000 voices baying for blood, for the grandmaster to punish the fraud, for the trash to be destroyed. And every single voice fed me. Kill the con man. Teach him his place. Energyless trash thinks he can stand with a grandmaster. Ding, ding, ding. The avalanche continued, uninterrupted. A sustained downpour of contempt from 10,000 hostile souls, all focused on me, all multiplied, all pouring into a core that was straining at the edge of a breakthrough. I lifted my head, finally, and looked at Grandmaster Steele, and I looked past him at Evelyn's triumphant face and Julian's cruel smile and my father's cold, closed expression, and I felt the last barrier in my core groan and begin to crack. I raised my hand off the rigged crystal, and I smiled. A duel, I said, and my voice, for the first time all day, was not meek. It rolled across the amphitheater, clear and calm and carrying. I accept. I turned to face the crowd, 10,000 faces contorted with scorn, and I spread my arms wide, like a man welcoming an old friend. But before we begin, I called out, I want to thank you, all of you, truly. I let my gaze sweep the Colosseum, and something in my expression made the front rows fall quiet. You came here today to watch me be destroyed. You've spent the last few minutes screaming every insult you can think of at me. Fraud, cripple, trash, beggar, worm. I smiled wider. Please, don't stop. You have no idea how much I need you to keep going. And that was the moment, though none of them understood it yet, that the trap they'd built for me finished becoming the trap I'd built for them. Because deep in my chest, the barrier finally shattered. You are now Tier 3, breakthrough complete. Warning, Contempt avalanche ongoing, ascension not slowing. Tier 4 threshold approaching. I was already Julian's equal, and with 10,000 people still screaming their hatred at me, I wasn't going to stop there. Grandmaster Steel did not wait for a formal signal. Grandmasters rarely do. He simply moved, and to the 10,000 spectators, he must have vanished. That was how fast a Tier 4 Blade Master closes distance. One instant he was 10 feet away, the next his thin sword was a silver blur streaking toward my throat. 2 weeks ago, that strike would have killed the original Ethan before he understood he was in danger. But I had just broken into Tier 3 on a river of 10,000 people's hatred, and my newly ascended senses turned the world to honey. I watched the blade come. I saw the grain of the steel, the flex of Steel's wrist, the microscopic tell in his shoulder that told me exactly where the tip would be. And I tilted my head, 1 inch, and let the sword hiss past my ear. Steel's eyes widened. The crowd's roar faltered. I hadn't just dodged. I dodged casually, contemptuously, the way he'd expected to cut me down. And a Grandmaster knows, instantly, in his bones, when something is wrong. Impossible, Steel breathed. You're energyless. The crystal was rigged, I said mildly, sliding my hands into my pockets. Evelyn tuned it to read me as a cripple no matter what. She wanted a fraud she could expose. She just didn't count on me not caring whether the crowd thought I was a fraud. I smiled. In fact, I was counting on it. All that lovely, focused contempt. You have no idea how generous this crowd has been to me in the last 5 minutes. Steele's face hardened. He didn't understand my words, but he understood the mockery, and mockery from an insect was intolerable. He struck again, faster, a flurry now, a storm of silver, the full art of a Tier 4 swordmaster unleashed, cuts that could shear through stone pillars, thrusts that could punch through steel plate. The crowd gasped and cheered, certain that this was the end, that the trash would be reduced to ribbons. I didn't draw a weapon. I didn't need one. I flowed between the blades like water, hands in my pockets, and not one of them touched me. Because here's the thing about my ascension that Steel couldn't have known. I hadn't just grown stronger. Every threshold I crossed refined my body and my perception, and the Knight family's cultivation manuals I devoured over the past week had given me technique to match the raw power. I wasn't just a Tier 3 core. I was a Tier 3 core piloted by someone who could see a Tier 4's every move a half second before he made it. And I was still climbing. Because the crowd, watching their Grandmaster fail to land a single blow, was getting frustrated. And frustrated crowds get nasty. What's he doing? Cut him already! Is the Grandmaster toying with the trash? Finish it! Coward! Stop running and die like the worm you are! Ding, ding, ding. Plus 400. Tier 4 threshold. 60%? 70%. You feel that, don't you? I said to Steel, still dodging, my voice low enough for only him. You felt it since your first strike. Every second we fight, I get faster, stronger. You're a Grandmaster. You fought 100 duels. Have you ever felt your opponent grow stronger in the middle of a fight? Steel leapt back, chest heaving, and for the first time, genuine fear flickered across his hawk face. Because he had felt it. He'd felt the insect he was supposed to exterminate become, blow by blow, harder to touch, until now, impossibly, he was the one on the defensive. What are you? He demanded. And I decided it was time. Not because I had to, because it would be so satisfying. I stopped dodging. I stood perfectly still in the center of the platform, arms loose at my sides, and I raised my voice so that it carried to every one of the 10,000 people in that amphitheater, to every camera broadcasting this live across the entire country. You want to know what I am? I called out. All of you? Fine. Let me explain the game you've all been playing without knowing the rules. The crowd quieted, uneasy now, sensing the turn. 2 weeks ago, I said, I woke up with a gift, a very simple one. Every insult thrown at me makes me stronger. Every ounce of contempt, every sneer, every cruel word. It doesn't wound me, it feeds me. It's converted directly into power. I let that hang in the vast silence. When my stepmother called me worthless in front of the clan, she made me stronger. When my brother called me trash, he handed me my first drop of mystic energy. When Willow dumped me in front of 500 people, she funded my rise. When 10,000 of you screamed fraud and cripple at me 2 minutes ago, I spread my arms wide. You didn't destroy me. You gave me the greatest power-up of my life. You broke me into Tier 3 with your own hatred, right here, in front of everyone. Dead silence. And then, slowly, horribly, I watched understanding dawn across 10,000 faces. I watched Evelyn's triumphant expression curdle into dawning horror. I watched Julian's cruel smile die on his lips. I watched Grandmaster Steele's sword hand begin, very slightly, to tremble. You, Evelyn's voice cracked over the microphone. You're lying. That's impossible. No such power exists. Ding! Denial scorn still counts, plus 50. You just made me stronger again, I said pleasantly. Thank you, Evelyn. Please, do keep insulting me. It's what I'm counting on. And that was the moment the true horror of their situation landed on all 10,000 of them at once. Because everything they knew how to do to me, every weapon they had, every insult, every jeer, every sneer, every ounce of the contempt they'd been drowning me in for the entire ceremony, was fuel. Their scorn was the one thing they had, and it was the one thing that made me stronger. They had built their entire attack on a foundation of hatred, and I had just told them, live, on camera, that their hatred was my food. I watched them try to stop. It was the funniest thing I have ever seen. Evelyn clamped her mouth shut mid-word. Julian, who had opened his mouth to shout something, froze with it half open. The crowd, which a moment ago had been baying, "Kill the trash!" went eerily, desperately silent. 10,000 people simultaneously realizing that every cruel word was a gift they could not afford to give. But here's the thing about a crowd of 10,000 people. You cannot make them all shut up at once. It's like trying to stop the tide with your hands. Somewhere in the upper rows, a man who hadn't heard clearly, or hadn't believed it, yelled out, "This is a trick! He's a con man!" Ding! Plus 60. "Thank you, sir," I called up to him cheerfully, and 10,000 people flinched. A woman near the front, panicking, hissed, "Shut up, you idiot, don't say anything," and then realized too late that telling someone to shut up is itself a small unkindness, and I felt the faintest ding, and I grinned at her, and she went white. The silence that followed was the silence of 10,000 people holding their breath, terrified to make a sound, because every sound they might make was a brick in my throne. I had turned an amphitheater full of my enemies into a morning full of people desperately, frantically, trying not to hate me out loud, and failing, because you cannot unhate on command, and hatred leaks. "You see the problem," I said conversationally, strolling now toward the frozen Grandmaster Steele. "You've spent your whole lives using contempt as a weapon. It's the only weapon people like you know. And now you're standing in a coliseum full of it, aimed at a man who eats it, and you finally understand that you never had a weapon at all. You had a feeding tube, and you've had it jammed into me since the moment I walked in." Steele, to his credit, was a warrior, and warriors don't freeze forever. His fear hardened into something desperate and cold. "Then I'll simply have to end this," he snarled. "Before you say another word and steal any more, ding, plus 50, power from me. Silence, worm." He raised his sword, gathered every ounce of his Tier 4 energy into a single, blazing, killing strike, a technique that could cleave a building in half. The whole amphitheater lit up with the golden glare of it. And I want you to understand what he did in that moment, in his fury, in his fear. He unleashed, at me, the single largest, most concentrated expression of pure murderous contempt in the entire ceremony. A Grandmaster's full-power killing intent, screaming, "You are nothing! You are dead! You are an insect I will erase!" poured directly into me at point-blank range. Tier 4 killing intent, maximum concentration, plus 5,000. Mystic energy has crossed 100,000. You are now Tier 4. You are now Grandmaster Steele's equal. As of this instant, you are his superior. The killing strike came down, and I caught it. Bare-handed. The blazing golden blade, the technique meant to cleave buildings, stopped dead against my open palm, and the shockwave of it blasted outward in a ring that flattened the ceremonial decorations and made 10,000 people scream and cover their faces. When the light faded, I was standing exactly where I'd been, unharmed, holding Grandmaster Steel's sword in my bare hand. And Steel was staring at me with the wide, hollow eyes of a man watching his entire understanding of the world collapse. "That strike," I said softly, "just made me a tier 4. You're equal. You spent 60 years earning that tier through blood and discipline. I earned it in about 4 seconds, because you were kind enough to hate me with everything you had." I closed my hand, and Steel's masterwork blade, forged to survive a war, shattered into glittering dust. "Thank you, Grandmaster. Sincerely. You've been the most generous person here." I released what was left of the hilt. It clattered to the platform, and in the vast, ringing, terrified silence of 10,000 people who had just watched a Tier 4 Grandmaster's ultimate technique caught in a bare hand, I turned, slowly, to face the Reed family, to face Evelyn, frozen and white, to face Julian, trembling, to face my father, whose iron composure had finally, completely cracked. "Now," I said, "let's talk about the succession." I walked toward the Reed family's platform, unhurried, and 10,000 people watched in absolute, breath-held silence, none of them daring to make a sound, because by now, the whole Colosseum understood the rules of the game. Evelyn recovered first, because Evelyn was a survivor above all else, and survivors adapt. She dropped to a warm, trembling smile and threw her arms wide. "Ethan, my darling boy! I always knew you were special. I always believed in you. This was all a test of your strength, and you passed magnificently. Come, let me embrace my brilliant son, Ding." Host, she has finally understood the rules. She has stopped feeding you and started buttering you. It won't save her. "Stop," I said, and she stopped. "You figured it out, I see. No more insults. Now it's honey." "It's a little late, Evelyn. 15 years too late, actually." I climbed the platform steps. "But you're right about one thing. It is time we talked honestly. So let's be honest, in front of everyone, since you love public ceremonies so much." I turned to the crowd, and I let my newly unlocked appraisal, which at Tier 4 had sharpened into something far beyond reading finances, sweep across the truth I'd spent the week assembling with Valeria's investigators. 15 years ago, I said, my birth mother, Clara Reed, the first wife of this family, died in what everyone was told was a sudden illness. I looked at Evelyn. It wasn't sudden, and it wasn't an illness. Valeria Knight's investigators reopened the medical records this week. Clara Reed was poisoned, slowly, over 8 months, with a rare toxin that mimics organ failure. I let that land in the silent amphitheater like a dropped anvil. The toxin was purchased through a shell account. The same shell account, it turns out, that Evelyn used to funnel my stolen inheritance offshore for the last 15 years. She used one account to murder my mother and rob me. Sloppy, really. But then, she never expected anyone to look, because she'd made sure everyone agreed I was too worthless to matter. The crowd made a low, horrified sound. Cameras zoomed. This was going out live to the entire country. Evelyn's face had gone from warm to bloodless. "Lies," she whispered. "You have no proof, you. I have the account records, the toxicology, the purchase orders, and the sworn statement of the apothecary who sold you the poison, who Valeria's people found last Tuesday, and who was very eager to talk in exchange for immunity." I smiled without any warmth at all. "I have all of it. And in about 10 minutes, so will the Attorney General, because Valeria Knight is delivering it to him personally, right now, while we speak." Arthur Reed made a sound I'd never heard from him. A low, broken exhalation. He turned to his wife, and his iron face was a ruin. "Evelyn, Clara's illness. Tell me he's lying. Tell me you didn't—" "Arthur," Evelyn started. "Tell me!" Arthur roared, and for the first time in 15 years, the patriarch of the Reed family looked at his second wife and saw her clearly. She couldn't tell him. The truth was written all over her white, panicked face. And that was when Julian snapped. I'd been watching him the whole time, watching the Golden Sun's entire world dissolve, watching his inheritance and his mother and his future evaporate in front of 10,000 people, and I knew, the way I always know now, exactly what he was going to do. Because people like Julian, when they're cornered, when they've lost everything, when their pride is bleeding out, they only have one move. They lash out. "No!" Julian screamed, and Tier 3 energy exploded off him in a golden storm as he hurled himself at me across the platform, his face contorted into something barely human. "You don't get to do this. You're trash. You're a worm. You're a worthless, energyless, gutter-born cripple, and I will not let you take everything from me. I'll kill you. I'll kill you, you piece of—" Ding, 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 ding. Tier 3 has crossed 500,000. You have surpassed Tier 4. You are entering Tier 5. Note, there are perhaps 3 Tier 5 practitioners in the entire country. As of this moment, you are the youngest and the strongest. Your dear brother did this. Julian's fist, wreathed in the full killing power of a Tier 3 prodigy, came screaming toward my face while he screamed his hatred into me at point-blank range, and it was, without question, the single most generous thing he had ever done for me in his life. I let his fist land. I wanted to feel it. This one, I wanted to savor. His best punch, his full power, everything he had, all his hatred and fear and wounded pride channeled into one strike aimed at killing me. It struck my cheek, and it did nothing. Nothing at all. His fist met my face and stopped as if he'd punched a mountain, and I watched the bones in his hand crack from the force of his own blow against my Tier 5 body. Julian howled and staggered back, cradling his shattered hand, staring at me with wild, disbelieving, terrified eyes. I turned my head slowly back to face him. I hadn't moved an inch. "Is that all?" I asked quietly. You. Julian was backing away now, his bravado gone, nothing left but naked animal fear. "What are you?" "I'm your little brother," I said. "The trash, the worm, the energyless cripple you pushed down the stairs and laughed at, remember?" I stepped toward him, and he flinched backward. "You made me, Julian. Every single one of you did. 15 years of contempt, and then 2 weeks of the most generous, sustained, high-quality hatred a man could ask for, all delivered by the people who wanted me dead the most." I stopped in front of him. "You built me, brick by brick, insult by insult. You spent your whole life trying to grind me into nothing, and all you did was forge me into a god. And the funniest part?" I leaned in, and I dropped my voice, and I gave him the same words he'd whispered to me on the day I woke up in this world. "Is that you'll never fully understand why you lost. Until your dying breath, you'll never figure out that you did this to yourself." Julian's legs gave out. The golden son of the Reed family sat down hard on the platform where he was supposed to be crowned, cradling his broken hand, staring up at the brother he'd tormented, and for the first time in his life, Julian Reed had absolutely nothing to say. Because he'd finally, instinctively, understood the one rule he could never afford to break. And he understood it far, far too late. The amphitheater was utterly silent. 10,000 people who had come to watch me destroyed had instead watched me ascend, on a river of their own hatred, from a kneeling nobody to the strongest man in the country in the span of a single ceremony. And then, at the far end of the Colosseum, the great doors opened. Valeria Knight walked in. She was flanked by a phalanx of dark-suited consortium agents, and behind them, unmistakably, a contingent of federal officers. She walked down the central aisle toward the platform with the unhurried certainty of a woman who owned the ground she stood on, and the crowd parted before her like water. She climbed the steps, and she came to stand beside me, and she surveyed the wreckage of the Reed family with cold, satisfied eyes. "The Attorney General has the file," she said just to me, quietly. "Global officers are here for Evelyn. The Knight Consortium filed for controlling emergency acquisition of the Reed Group 90 minutes ago, citing the fraud and criminal conduct of its leadership. It's already approved." Her mouth curved. "Your family's empire is mine now. Which means, functionally," she glanced at me, "it's ours." She turned to face the 10,000 watching, and the country watching behind them, and Valeria Knight raised her voice, and the Queen of Arcadia rendered her verdict. "Evelyn Reed is under arrest for the murder of Clara Reed and the theft of Ethan Reed's inheritance. Julian Reed is stripped of any claim to the Reed Group, which as of today is a subsidiary of the Knight Consortium." Her ice-chip gaze swept the crowd, and 10,000 people shrank. "And Ethan Reed, the man this city spent 15 years calling trash, is under my personal protection, and my partner, in business, and in every other way that matters." She reached out and took my hand, deliberately, in front of everyone, in front of every camera. "Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to come and tell him so directly." A thin, dangerous smile. He does love to hear it. What followed was, as Valeria would later put it, a very productive afternoon. The federal officers took Evelyn away in handcuffs, and she did not go quietly. She screamed the whole way, a mixture of denials and threats, and when those ran out, a stream of pure, venomous hatred aimed straight at me. "You'll pay for this, you gutter-born filth, you worthless piece of trash. I should have drowned you the day your mother died. I should have. Ding, ding, ding. Even now she feeds you. Some people never learn. Thank you, Evelyn, I called after her, and I meant it, because a small part of me would always be grateful to the woman who'd hated me enough to make me a god. Enjoy prison. I hear it's very character building. Arthur Reed did not scream. Art Reed simply sat down on the edge of the platform, his iron shell finally completely shattered, and put his head in his hands. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were red. I let them tell me you were nothing, he said hoarsely. For 15 years. I looked at my own son, and I let them convince me you weren't worth looking at. He shook his head slowly. I didn't protect your mother. I didn't protect you. I stood by, and I let it happen because it was easier than the truth. He drew a shaking breath. I have no right to ask for anything. But I'm sorry, Ethan, for all of it. I looked at my father, this broken man who had failed the boy whose body I wore, and I felt the original Ethan's 15 years of desperate, unrequited love for this man ache in my chest, alongside my own cold clarity. I'm not going to hate you, I said quietly. Hatred is a currency I collect from my enemies, and you're too pathetic to be my enemy. Arthur flinched, but I wasn't finished. You were weak. You chose comfort over your own family, and it cost your first wife her life and your son his childhood. You'll live with that. The Reed Group is Valeria's now, so you have nothing left to give away and nothing left to hide behind. Go home, sit in that empty mansion, and think, every single day, about the fact that the son you threw away became the most powerful man in the country, and you were too much of a coward to be part of it. I turned away. That's a worse punishment than anything I could do to you. Goodbye, Father. He didn't follow. I heard, behind me, the sound of an old man beginning to weep. I didn't look back. Some doors you just let close. And then there was Willow. She'd been standing frozen at the edge of the platform through the entire spectacle, and now, as I turned, she stumbled toward me, her earlier glittering confidence in ruins. She'd dumped me, publicly, cruelly, and attached herself to Julian, the sure thing, the golden sun. And she'd just watched the golden sun shatter his own hand against my face and get stripped of everything, while the trash she'd thrown away was crowned the most powerful man in the country by the Queen of Arcadia herself. Ethan, she said, and her voice was sweet now, so sweet, the way it had never once been when I was poor. Ethan, I was so wrong. I was foolish. I let them poison my mind against you. But I always knew, deep down, that you were special. I always. She reached for my arm. We were engaged, Ethan. We have a history. Whatever I said at the banquet, I didn't mean it. I was pressured. I looked at her hand on my sleeve, and then at her face, and I almost laughed. Instead, I gently removed her hand. Willow, I said. At the banquet, in front of 500 people, you told me you'd rather die alone than let me touch you. You said I disgusted you. You said standing near me made your skin crawl. I smiled. And do you know what? I've been meaning to thank you for that. Because that little speech gave me 80 points of wealth with the public multiplier, and it was one of the first big deposits toward everything I have now. I stepped back from her. So we're square. You called me trash, and the trash used your contempt to become a god. That's a fair trade. Go home, Willow. And next time someone tells you a diamond is a rock, do your own appraisal before you throw it in the mud. She burst into tears. Not the delicate, strategic tears of a schemer, but the real, ugly, desperate tears of a girl who has just understood, completely, the scale of what she threw away. I heard later that the Knight side branch, humiliated by association and cut off by Valeria's true bloodline, collapsed within the year, and Willow ended up managing a boutique in a second-tier city, telling anyone who'd listen that she was once engaged to the great Ethan Reed. Nobody believed her. I walked away from the wreckage of my old family with Valeria at my side, and as we passed the shattered, kneeling form of Grandmaster Steele, the old man reached out and gripped the hem of my coat. Please, he rasped, whatever you are, the debt I owed the Vances is paid. I was a fool. I didn't know. Have mercy. I stopped. You called me a worm you'd exterminate, I reminded him, loudly, in front of everyone. You gave me tier 4 with your killing intent. I crouched to his level. So I'm not going to kill you, Steele. I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to let you live, as a tier 4 who was defeated by a 2-week-old cultivator, and let the whole world know it. Every grandmaster in the country is going to hear how Magnus Steele's ultimate technique was caught in a boy's bare hand. I patted his shoulder. Your contempt built me. Now your shame is my monument. Enjoy it. I stood and walked on. Steele did not get up. Strength/wealth/charm/fortune, all past 500,000. Reputation, national. You are, as of today, the most talked about man in the country. System commentary. You knelt in the mud this morning. You leave a sovereign. Well done, host. But do not get comfortable. The bigger the throne, the more people look down from higher up. And you know what that means. I did know what that meant. And the system, as usual, was right. Because that evening, as Valeria and I stood on the balcony of the consortium penthouse, looking out over the city I'd just conquered, her phone rang. She looked at the screen, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw something flicker across the Queen of Arcadia's face that looked almost like caution. "It's the Celestial Court," she said quietly. "The what?" She lowered the phone without answering it. "Ethan, everything you've faced so far, the Vances, the Sterlings, the Grandmasters, all of it, that's the mortal world. The rich and powerful of ordinary society." She turned to me, and her dark eyes were serious. "But above all of that, above the great families, above the national government even, there is another world, the true apex. Ancient cultivation clans, sovereigns and beyond, powers that have ruled from the shadows for 1,000 years. They call themselves the Celestial Court, and they do not like it." She held up the phone. "When a nobody with no lineage, no master, and no permission ascends to Tier 5 in 2 weeks, in public, on live television, and embarrasses one of their affiliated grandmasters in front of the whole country." The phone stopped ringing. A moment later, a message arrived. Valeria read it, and her jaw tightened. "They're summoning you," she said, "to the court, to answer for your insolence, to be judged by the elders of the great immortal clans." She looked up at me. "Ethan, these are people who consider you an insect, a jumped-up mortal who doesn't know his place. They are going to look down on you the way you can't even imagine. They are going to hold the single most concentrated gathering of pure, ancient, absolute contempt this world has ever produced, and point all of it directly at you." I was quiet for a moment, and then, slowly, I began to smile. Valeria watched my expression change, and understanding dawned across her face, and then, impossibly, the Queen of Arcadia started to laugh. A real, delighted, dangerous laugh. "Oh," she said. "Oh, they have no idea what they've just invited, do they?" "An entire court," I said softly, looking out at the city lights, feeling the golden ocean of power coiled inside my chest, hungry for more. Of the most powerful, most arrogant beings in the world, all gathered in one room, all looking down on me, all ready to tell me, at length, exactly how far beneath them I am. I turned to Valeria, and I held out my hand. "Book the flight," I said. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The Celestial Court did not meet in a city. The coordinates Valeria's people decrypted led us high into the Cloudspire Mountains, to a place that didn't appear on any map, and when our aircraft crested the final peak, I understood why. Hidden in the clouds, suspended between the mountains on pillars of white jade, was a floating city. An entire palace complex of soaring pagodas and mirror-still reflecting pools and gardens that hung in the open air. All of it wrapped in a haze of mystic energy so thick it made my 2-week-old Tier 5 core feel like a candle held up to the sun. "This is the seat of the 9 immortal clans," Valeria said quietly beside me. She'd insisted on coming, and I'd learned enough about her by now not to argue. "They've ruled the hidden world for 1,000 years. The elders here are Tier 6, Tier 7. The court sovereign, they say, is beyond measurement." She looked at me. "Ethan, I've built an empire in the mortal world, and I have never, not once, felt as small as I feel right now looking at this place. These are not people you can buy or outmaneuver. These are people who think of the president of the country as a mildly useful pet." "Good," I said, watching the floating city grow closer. "The more they look down on me, the further I climb. Let them think I'm a pet." We were met at the landing platform by a young man in immaculate white robes, beautiful and cold, with the effortless arrogance of someone who had never in his life met his equal. He looked at me, and then at my perfectly ordinary modern suit, and his lip curled with a contempt so refined it was almost artistic. "So this is the mortal upstart who caused such a fuss?" he said, not to me but past me, to the air, as if I weren't worth addressing directly. "A 2-week cultivator, no lineage, no master, no manners. And he had the audacity to embarrass an affiliated grandmaster and broadcast it to the whole mortal world like a circus act?" He sighed. "The elders should have simply had him erased. Instead, they want to look at him first. Very well. Follow me, insect. Try not to touch anything. Your kind leaves stains." Ding ding ding. Contempt absorbed. Tier 7 lineage source. Quality, exquisite, plus 3,000. Note, the scorn of the truly powerful is worth a fortune. This is going to be the best meal of your life. I felt the power pour into me, richer and denser than anything I'd tasted in the mortal world, and I had to work very hard to keep my expression humble and cowed. Because that was the play here, the same play as always. Look small, look beneath them, let them feel safe being cruel, and let them empty their entire storehouse of 1,000 years of accumulated arrogance directly into my core. "Thank you," I said meekly to the white-robed young man. "I'll be careful." He didn't even acknowledge that I'd spoken. He simply turned and glided away, and Valeria and I followed him through the floating city, and everywhere we walked, we drew the same reaction. Immortal disciples and elders paused to stare at the mortal upstart, and every single one of them looked at me the way you'd look at something a dog dragged in. That's him? He barely has a tier 5 core. He smells of the mortal world. How did they even let him up here? Erase him and be done with it. Why dignify an ant with a trial? Look at his little suit, his little mortal woman. How quaint, how utterly beneath us. Ding, 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 ding. By the time we reached the court's central hall, I had passed level 60, and my tier 5 core was groaning at the edge of its ceiling, straining toward a threshold that, 3 days ago, Valeria had told me a mortal could not cross in a single lifetime. And these people had barely started. The central hall of the celestial court was a cathedral of white jade and gold, vast enough to hold a mountain, and it was full. 9 thrones stood on a raised dais, one for the head of each immortal clan, and each throne was occupied by an elder whose presence pressed down on the room like the weight of an ocean. Around and below them, on tiered galleries, sat hundreds of the court's most senior members, sovereigns, grandmasters beyond grandmasters, the true hidden apex of the entire world. And every single one of them was looking down at me. I want you to really picture it. Hundreds of the most powerful, most ancient, most colossally arrogant beings on the planet, a concentration of raw contempt that had never existed in one room before, all of it focused, like a magnifying glass focusing the sun, onto one point, onto me. The system was so happy it was practically vibrating. Density detected. This is what you were made for, host. Kneel. Look small. And let them fill you up. I walked to the center of the hall, and I knelt. On the cold white jade, in front of the 9 thrones and the hundreds of watching immortals, I knelt and I bowed my head. Exactly as I had knelt in the mud in the Reed courtyard 2 weeks ago. The old Ethan would have knelt because he was crushed. I knelt because I was hungry. The elder in the central throne, an ancient figure with a long white beard and eyes like frozen stars, spoke, and his voice filled the vast hall without seeming to rise at all. "Mortal," he said, "you have disturbed the order of the world. You ascended without permission, without lineage, without a master to answer for you. You exposed the workings of cultivation to the mortal masses like a street performer, and you humiliated a grand master under our protection, on a broadcast seen by tens of millions of common eyes." His frozen gaze bored into me. "You are an aberration, an insolent, low-burrow, masterless stain upon 1,000 years of sacred order. You do not belong in this hall. You do not belong in this world." And but for our curiosity as to how such a piece of refuse ascended so quickly, you would already be dust. He leaned forward. "Explain yourself, worm, and know that whatever you say, your fate is already decided. You will be erased. We merely wish to know what we are erasing before we do." Ding, 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 ding. Tier 8 Court Elder, sustained, plus 12,000. Mystic energy has crossed 5 million. You are breaking through Tier 6. I knelt there, head bowed, and I felt the ceiling of Tier 5 shatter like glass, felt my core expand into something vast and golden and humming with a power that a week ago I couldn't have imagined. Tier 6. In a single sentence from a single elder, and there were 300 more of them in the room. I lifted my head, and I looked up at the 9 thrones, at the assembled might of the hidden world, at the greatest concentration of arrogance the planet had ever produced, and I gave them the same words I'd given the Colosseum, the same words I'd whispered on the day I woke up, the words that had become my prayer. "Before I explain," I said, and my voice, though quiet, carried to every corner of that impossible hall, "I want to thank you, all of you, from the bottom of my soul." I smiled up at the frozen-eyed elder. "You've gathered here, hundreds of you, the proudest beings in the world, specifically to look down on me, to judge me, to tell me, at length, exactly how far beneath you I am." My smile widened. "You have no idea what a gift that is. So please, elders of the celestial court, Sovereigns of the 9 clans. I spread my arms, kneeling, welcoming it all. Don't hold back. Give me everything you've got. They gave me everything they had. Of course they did. Because arrogance cannot resist an invitation to be arrogant. My little speech, my open-armed welcome of their scorn, they read it as the delusional bravado of a doomed insect, and it offended them to their ancient cores. A ripple of outrage moved through the hall, and then the contempt came down like an avalanche off a mountain. The insolence! He mocks the court. He mocks 1,000 years of order. Low-born filth, you dare invite our judgment as though it were a favor to you? Erase him. Erase him now, before his madness stains this hall any longer. A masterless worm, a mortal stain, a jumped-up piece of refuse who should be scrubbed from existence. Ding! Ding, 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 ding. 300 sources, average tier 6+, plus 40,000, plus 80,000, plus 150,000. Mystic energy climbing past all previous ceilings. Tier 7. System note, this is more power than you gained in your entire Mortal World campaign, in 9 seconds. Keep them talking. I knelt in the center of that hall, and I let 300 immortals scream 1,000 years of accumulated arrogance into me all at once. And I ascended so fast the world blurred. Tier 6 to Tier 7 in the space of a single collective outburst. My core wasn't a candle anymore. It was becoming a sun of its own, and it was still growing, and the elders on their 9 thrones began one by one to notice. The frozen-eyed elder in the central throne was the first. His ancient eyes narrowed, then widened, as he felt my aura swelling in real time, felt the impossible truth of it. What, his core? It's growing. Right now, in front of us. How is he? And I decided, as I had in the Colosseum, that the most satisfying thing in the world would be to tell them exactly why they'd already lost. I rose to my feet, slowly. And as I rose, I let my aura unfurl, no longer hiding it, and a wave of golden Tier 7 pressure rolled outward across the hall, and hundreds of immortals, who a moment ago had been sneering, felt it wash over them, and went abruptly, uneasily silent. Let me explain the nature of your mistake, I said, and my voice had changed. It filled the hall now the way the elders had, effortless and vast. I have a gift, a simple one. Contempt makes me stronger. Every sneer, every insult, every ounce of scorn directed at me is converted directly into power. It's how a masterless mortal became a Tier 7 in 2 weeks. I turned slowly, taking in the whole assembled court. You summoned me here to look down on me. You gathered the greatest concentration of arrogance this world has ever seen, in one room, and you pointed all of it at me. I smiled. You didn't summon me to my trial. You summoned me to my feast. And you've spent the last minute serving me 1,000 years of power on a golden plate. Silence. And then, exactly as it had in the Colosseum, but 100 times more delicious, I watched understanding spread across the faces of the most powerful beings in the world. I watched 300 immortals, beings of colossal pride, who had never once in their long lives had to consider that their contempt might be a weakness, arrive simultaneously at the horrifying realization that everything they knew how to do to me made me stronger. I watched them try to stop, and oh, it was so much better than the Colosseum. Because these were disciplined beings, ancient masters of their own minds and energies, and they tried, with all their formidable will, to simply cease feeling contempt for me. They couldn't do it. You cannot will yourself to respect an insect. 1,000 years of looking down on the entire world does not switch off because it becomes inconvenient. And so they sat there, 300 of the proudest beings alive, straining every fiber of their monumental self-control to not feel the contempt that was their very nature, and leaking it anyway, in flickers and cracks, every one of which pinged into me like a coin into a fountain. Ding, ding, ding. An elder on the 3rd throne, a proud woman with silver hair, ground out through clenched teeth, "This is beneath contempt," and then caught herself, horrified, as the word contempt left her mouth and fed me. Ding, a sovereign in the gallery hissed, "Disgraceful upstart," to his neighbor before he could stop himself. Ding, the central elder, desperately trying to reassert control, commanded, "Everyone, cease speaking, do not give the parasite another," and then had to bite off the word, because parasite was itself an insult, and I felt it land, and I felt his ancient composure crack as he understood he could not even give the order to stop without feeding me. I started to laugh. I couldn't help it. Standing in the center of the celestial court, watching the hidden rulers of the world tie themselves in knots trying not to hate me and failing, I laughed. And my laughter rolled through the hall, and it was the laughter of a man who has finally, completely won. "You see the trap now, don't you?" I said, spreading my arms. "Your entire existence is built on looking down. It's the water you swim in. It's every thought you've had for 1,000 years. And now, for the first time, you have to not do it, in front of the one being in the world who turns it into power, and you cannot. You physically cannot. Your greatest strength, your absolute certainty of your own superiority, is the exact thing that's crowning me right now." I turned in a slow circle, drinking in the leaking, uncontrollable contempt of 300 immortals. Every second you sit there believing you're better than me, you make it less true. So please, keep believing it. Keep looking down on me. I'll take every ounce. The frozen-eyed elder stood from the central throne, and now there was real fear in those ancient eyes, and something worse than fear, the desperate fury of a proud being cornered. "Enough," he snarled. "If we cannot judge you, then we will simply destroy you before you grow further. Sovereigns of the 9 clans, strike him down, together, now, with everything, before he—" And that right there was the final gift, because the 9 most powerful elders of the celestial court, in their fear and their fury, rose from their thrones as one, gathered 1,000 years of cultivation, each into their palms, and unleashed upon me, simultaneously, the single greatest concentration of pure murderous intent, of "you are nothing, you are beneath us, you will be erased," that the world had ever produced. 9 sovereign tier killing techniques, wreathed in the absolute contempt of 9 immortal clans, converged on me from every direction at once. 9 tier 8 sovereigns, maximum killing intent, simultaneous. Mystic energy, uncountable. You have transcended tier 8. You have become something the system has no name for. Congratulations, host. You are the strongest being who has ever lived. And they did it. Every last one of them, together, did it. The 9 techniques struck me, and the world went white. When the white faded, I was still standing. The 9 techniques of the 9 sovereigns, the combined killing power of 1,000 years of immortal cultivation, had struck me from every direction at once, and I had not moved. My suit wasn't even singed. Around me, in a perfect circle, the white jade floor of the celestial court had been vaporized into a smooth crater, and the 9 elders stood at its edge, their arms still outstretched, their expressions frozen in a dawning, absolute horror. Because their ultimate strike hadn't harmed me, it had finished me. I could feel it now, the thing the system had no name for. The golden ocean in my chest had become something else, something that was less like power and more like law, a stillness at the center of me that the whole floating city seemed to bend toward. When I breathed, the clouds outside the great windows moved. When I took a step, the 9 thrones groaned on their foundations. I had walked into that hall a 2-week-old mortal tier 5, and their contempt, their fear, their 1,000 years of arrogance had made me into the single most powerful being who had ever drawn breath. And I hadn't lifted a finger to do it. They had done all of it, every last bit, themselves. "Impossible," the frozen-eyed elder whispered. His voice was cracked, ancient, terrified. 9 sovereigns, the convergence of the 9 clans. It has ended wars, it has leveled mountains. And you stand there, you keep saying impossible, I said gently, and my quiet voice rolled through the ruined hall like distant thunder. You said it when I dodged the Grandmaster. You said it when I caught the sword. You've built your whole world on the certainty of what is possible and what is beneath you. And every time reality disagrees, you just say, impossible, and look down harder. I took a step toward the 9 of them, and they, the rulers of the hidden world, flinched backward as one. Let me give you a new word. Try consequence. Because that's what I am. I'm the consequence of 1,000 years of people like you deciding that contempt was a thing you could throw at others without cost. I'm the bill, and it's come due. I raised one hand, palm up, and let a fraction of what I now was become visible, a soft golden light that filled the entire hall and pressed down on 300 immortals with the weight of an ocean. Sovereigns who had never bowed to anyone in their long lives found their knees buckling. Elders who had ruled from the shadows for centuries pressed their faces to the vaporized jade. In the space of a breath, the entire celestial court, the true apex of the world, was kneeling, not because I commanded it, because in the presence of what I had become, kneeling was simply the shape their bodies took. I could have ended them. All of them. In that moment, I genuinely could have unmade the 9 immortal clans with a thought. But I remembered what the system had told me, all the way back on the first day, in the mud of the reed courtyard. A god who breaks his toys immediately runs out of toys to break. So instead, I lowered my hand, and I let the pressure ease, just enough for them to breathe, and I spoke to the kneeling court. "I'm not going to erase you," I said. "You spent this whole day telling me I was beneath you, that I didn't belong in your world, that I was a masterless stain. And you were half right. I don't belong in your world." I looked around the ruined hall, at the 9 humbled elders, at the hundreds of prostrate immortals. Your world belongs to me now. All of it. The 9 clans, the celestial court, the 1,000-year order. It's mine, because you gave it to me, one insult at a time. I let that settle. You'll keep running things day to day, because I have better uses for my time than immortal bureaucracy. But you'll answer to me. And the next time any of you, or anyone under you, is tempted to look down on someone weaker and call them trash, I want you to remember this room. Remember the day the whole court knelt to a 2-week-old mortal because they couldn't stop feeding him their own contempt. Remember that the man you spit on might just be the man who eats it. I smiled. Kindness, it turns out, would have kept you safe. But you didn't have any. So here we are. Nobody argued. 300 of the most powerful beings in the world knelt in silence, and the loudest sound in that vast hall was the wind moving through the shattered windows. And then, from somewhere far above, somewhere at the very peak of the floating city, a voice spoke. It was not loud. It was not angry. It was, in fact, warm and amused, and it made the entire celestial court, elders and sovereigns and all, go rigid with a reverence that bordered on terror. "Well," the voice said, "isn't this interesting?" A figure descended into the hall. Not flying exactly, more like the world rearranged itself so that they were simply here, when a moment ago they had not been. It was a woman, ageless, neither young nor old, dressed in simple gray, with eyes that held galaxies. And the instant she appeared, I felt something I had not felt since I woke up in this world. I felt the presence of someone who might, possibly, be my equal. The court sovereign, Valeria breathed behind me. I'd almost forgotten she was there. She'd been shielded through the whole exchange by an instinct I hadn't even consciously formed. The one they say is beyond measurement, the true ruler of the hidden world. She hasn't shown herself in 300 years. The court sovereign drifted down to stand across the ruined hall from me, and the 9 elders pressed their foreheads so hard to the floor I thought the jade might crack. She looked at them with mild distaste, and then she looked at me, and she smiled. "My children are so predictable," she said. 1,000 years of ruling the world, and they still can't resist kicking something small, even when it's obviously a trap. She shook her head. "I felt you the moment you crossed into Tier 6. I've been watching. I wanted to see how far they'd take it before one of you broke." Her galaxy eyes glittered. "I did not expect them to hand an outsider my entire court in an afternoon. That's new. In 3,000 years, that's genuinely new." I studied her, and for the first time since I'd gained my power, I couldn't feel the bottom of someone. Every other being I'd faced, I could sense their ceiling, not her. "Are you going to try to erase me too?" I asked. The court sovereign laughed, a rich, delighted sound. "Erase you? Child, you are the most fascinating thing to happen to this world in 3,000 years. Why would I erase you?" She tilted her head. "Though I am curious. Your gift only works on contempt, on scorn, on being looked down upon. Which means," and here her ancient eyes sharpened with real interest, "the only way you ever grow is if someone hates you. You built all of this." She gestured at the ruined hall, at the kneeling court, on a foundation of other people's cruelty. "So tell me, Ethan Reed, what happens to the man who eats contempt when he finally reaches the top? When there's no one left above him to look down on him? When the whole world kneels and the insults stop?" She smiled, and it was not unkind. "What does a god of scorn do when no one will scorn him anymore?" And that, I realized, was the one question the system had never answered. I thought about her question. I really thought about it, standing there in the ruined hall of the celestial court, the strongest being who had ever lived. And for a moment, I felt the shape of the trap inside my own gift. Because she was right. My power came from being looked down on, from scorn, from cruelty aimed my way. And I had just made the entire world kneel. If I'd built my strength on a foundation of other people's contempt, then reaching the very top should have meant reaching the end. No one left above me. No one left to sneer. The well run dry. And then the system chimed, one last time, and it said something it had never said before. "Final evolution unlocked. Asks the right question. So let me tell you the truth I've been waiting for you to earn. The contempt was never the point. It was the fuel for the launch. It got you off the ground. But a rocket that never separates from its fuel tank never reaches orbit. You have absorbed enough scorn to transcend the need for it. From this moment, you no longer grow from being looked down upon. You have graduated. From here, you grow from something else, something you already found and almost didn't notice because it gave you no numbers. I understood. I looked back over my shoulder at Valeria Knight, the Queen of Arcadia, who had come with me into the seat of the immortal clans, not because she was strong enough to survive it, she wasn't, but because she refused to let me walk into the lion's den alone. Who had brushed her thumb over my old scars and called me not trash before I'd ever shown her a single ounce of power. Who had looked at a stranger dying in a landslide 2 years and 1 life ago and been saved by a kindness that asked for nothing. The system had told me, on the very first day, kindness gives you nothing. It had been wrong. Or rather, it had been right about the numbers and wrong about everything that mattered. The contempt of my enemies had made me strong, but it had never made me anything. It had built the throne. It had never given me a single reason to sit on it. Valeria had. You asked what a god of scorn does when no one will scorn him anymore, I said, turning back to the court sovereign. The answer is, he stops needing it. The contempt was a ladder. I've reached the top. I don't need the ladder to keep standing here. I glanced back at Valeria, and then at the kneeling court, and then at the ageless woman with galaxies in her eyes. The people who hated me made me powerful. That's true. But I'm not going to spend eternity hunting for someone to look down on me so I can keep growing, like some kind of addict. That's the trap you were pointing at, and I'm not walking into it. I let my aura settle, calm and vast and complete. I have enough. I have more than enough. And the one person who never once looked down on me is standing right behind me. That's what I grow from now. Not their hatred, her faith. I smiled. Turns out kindness was the real cheat code all along. It just took me a while to read the fine print. The court sovereign stared at me for a long moment, and then slowly, she began to smile, and it was a smile of genuine, ancient delight. 3,000 years, she murmured, and I have never once heard anyone give that answer. She inclined her head, the barest fraction, but every immortal in that hall gasped, because the court sovereign did not incline her head to anyone. The world is mine to guard, Ethan Reed, and I have guarded it a long, long time, and I have grown very tired of my proud, predictable children. She glanced at the kneeling elders with fond contempt. You are neither proud nor predictable. You are the first genuinely new thing I've seen in an age. She straightened. So I will make you an offer no one has been made in 3,000 years. Rule beside me. Not beneath, not above, beside. Let the old order kneel to the both of us. And when I finally grow tired enough to lay this world down, let it be in the hands of the one man who reached the top of it and chose kindness over the climb. Behind me, I heard Valeria let out a very soft breath. I looked at the court sovereign, and I looked at the ruined hall full of the humbled apex of the world, and I felt, at last, the thing I'd been chasing since I woke up in a doormat's body, in the worst room of a mansion full of people who despised me. Not power. I'd had power for a while now. Peace. I accept, I said, on one condition. I reached back, and Valeria stepped forward and took my hand, and I drew her up beside me, in front of the court sovereign, in front of the 9 clans, in front of the entire hidden world. She rules with me. Every inch I climb, she climbs. That's non-negotiable. The court sovereign looked at Valeria, at the mortal woman standing fearless in a hall that could have unmade her with a breath, holding the hand of the strongest being alive, and she laughed again, warm and pleased. Of course she does, the sovereign said. I would have insisted. And that was how it ended. Not with fire, not with a mountain of corpses, though I could have made one. It ended with the entire celestial court, the true rulers of the world, rising from their knees to bow, formally now, to the 2 of us, to the trash the world had spit on, and the queen who had never once looked down. The 9 elders swore their oaths. The white-robed young man who had called me an insect at the landing platform prostrated himself so deeply I thought he might dig through the floor, stammering apologies. I told him not to worry about it. I told him, honestly, that his contempt had helped get me here, and that he should consider his debt paid. He wept. And as Valeria and I walked out of that impossible floating city, hand in hand, into the clear, cold light above the clouds, the system chimed one final time, and its tone had changed, softened, almost proud. Objective complete. Ascend. Status. Absolute. There is no one above you. There is no one who can look down on you. The climb is over. New objective. Live. Properly this time. With her. Host, you did it. You knelt in the mud, and you let the whole world build you a throne, and then you were wise enough to know it was never the throne that mattered. Be happy, Ethan. You earned it the hard way. System going dormant. Call if you need me. You won't. The panel faded from my vision, and for the first time in 2 weeks, my sight was just my own. I looked at Valeria. She looked at me. So, she said, one eyebrow arching, that sword-edged smile playing at her mouth. Wife, we said we'd revisit it. We did say that, I agreed. The whole celestial court just watched you demand that I rule the world beside you, she said. I think, at this point, a formal correction would be very confusing for everyone. Deeply confusing, I said. Reputationally irresponsible, really. Catastrophic, Valeria agreed gravely. And then, the Queen of Arcadia, the woman who ruled an empire, who had just watched a 2-week-old mortal humble the immortal apex of the world, leaned in and kissed me, high above the clouds, and for that one perfect moment, there were no systems, no tears, no thrones, no insults left to collect. Just her. And it turned out, that was worth more than all of it. 1 year later. I want to walk you through what became of everyone, because in my experience, the most satisfying part of any story isn't the moment you win. It's the long, quiet aftermath, where you get to watch, at your leisure, exactly what your victory cost the people who tried to bury you. So let me give you the tour. Evelyn Reed was convicted of the murder of my mother, Clara, along with 15 years of financial fraud, embezzlement, and a laundry list of lesser crimes that Valeria's forensic accountants unearthed once they knew where to dig. The trial was the most watched in the country's history, largely because it followed directly on the heels of the Coliseum broadcast, and the whole nation had become morbidly obsessed with the Reed family. She was sentenced to life without possibility of parole. I visited her exactly once, in prison, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted to close the door properly. She spat at me through the glass. You think you've won? You gutter-born piece of filth? You worthless, jumped-up trash? I hope you rot. I hope that night woman leaves you. I hope. Ding! Plus 50 wealth. Note, you no longer need this, but the system keeps the receipts anyway, for old time's sake. Consider it a tip. I actually laughed out loud, right there in the visiting room, because that was the thing I hadn't expected. Even after I transcended the need for it, even after I reached the absolute top where growth came from Valeria and not from scorn, the system never fully turned off the meter. Every insult still pinged. It just didn't matter anymore. It was pocket change on an infinite fortune, a habit, a wink. And I found I sort of loved it. Every time some furious, defeated enemies screamed their hatred at me, that cheerful little ding reminded me exactly how I'd gotten here. Thank you, Evelyn, I said, standing. You were, genuinely, one of my most generous investors. I wouldn't be who I am without you. I hope that thought keeps you warm in here. I left. She was still screaming when the door closed. Ding, 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 all the way down the hall. I tipped the guard on my way out. Julian Reed did not go to prison, because being an arrogant coward isn't technically a crime. But I did something to him that I think was worse. When the Knight Consortium absorbed the Reed Group, I had one specific instruction. Julian was not to be cast into the street. He was to be given a job. An entry-level job. In the mailroom of the very company he'd expected to inherit. Full salary of a mailroom clerk. No special treatment, no title. And a strict, ironclad policy that he could never be promoted and could never quit without forfeiting the modest allowance that was the only thing keeping his father's household afloat. So every single day, the golden son of the Reed family, the Tier 3 prodigy who was supposed to rule an empire, pushes a mail cart through the halls of the building that bears his family's old name, and delivers memos to executives who used to bow to him. He is neither destroyed nor free. He simply exists, small and gray and forgotten, in the shadow of everything he lost, watching the trash he tormented rule the world from the top floor. I hear he doesn't talk much anymore. I hear sometimes he just stands at the window on the mailroom floor and stares up at the penthouse, and no one knows what he's thinking. I know what he's thinking. He's thinking about the day he called me trash and handed me my first drop of power. He's thinking about it every single day. That's the sentence. And unlike his mother's, it never ends. Arthur Reed, my father, lives alone in the old Reed mansion, which is now the only asset he has left. deeded to him by me, out of something that wasn't quite mercy and wasn't quite contempt. He's aged 20 years in one. He writes me letters sometimes, long, rambling, apologetic letters about Clara, about the boy he failed, about the coward he was. I don't answer them. But I don't throw them away either. I keep them in a drawer. Maybe someday I'll read them properly. Maybe I won't. Some wounds you just carry, and the man who inflicted them doesn't get to decide when they heal. Willow Knight, as I mentioned, ended up managing a boutique in a second-tier city after her family's side branch collapsed. But there's a detail I didn't tell you. About 6 months after the Colosseum, she showed up at the Consortium Tower, having spent, I later learned, most of her remaining savings on a designer outfit specifically to look worthy of me again. She talked her way into the lobby and demanded to see me, insisting we had a connection, that our engagement meant something, that she'd always believed in me. I happened to be in the lobby, so I let her say her piece. And when she was done, breathless and hopeful, I looked at her and I said, "Willow, do you remember what you told me the last time we spoke, on the platform, when you begged me to take you back?" She didn't, so I reminded her. "I told you to do your own appraisal before you throw a diamond in the mud. You didn't listen. You spent your last savings on a dress to impress a man you called trash to his face, instead of using that money and that effort to build something of your own." I shook my head. "That's your whole tragedy right there. You've spent your entire life trying to attach yourself to someone else's worth, because you never believed you had any of your own. I'm not your ladder, Willow. I never was. Go home, build something, or don't, but stop chasing men up mountains you're too afraid to climb yourself." Security escorted her out. She cried the whole way. Ding, a little one, from the frustrated insult she muttered under her breath. Pocket change. I had it donated to a women's shelter in her name, which I like to think is the most useful thing Willow Knight has ever done. Grandmaster Magnus Steele kept his life, as I'd promised, and kept his shame along with it. The story of his ultimate technique being caught in a 2-week-old cultivator's bare hand spread through every martial circle in the country within days. He lost his students. He lost his standing. He lost the aura of invincibility that had been his entire identity for 60 years. But here's the part that surprised me. About 8 months in, Steele showed up at the base of the Cloudspire Mountains, and he knelt, and he asked to become my disciple. Not out of ambition, out of understanding. He'd spent his whole life believing strength came from looking down on the weak, and I had shattered that belief along with his sword. And now, in his old age, he wanted to learn what I actually knew. I let him. He's a much better man now than he was as a grandmaster. Funny how being humbled does that, if you survive it. Most people don't get the chance. I gave him the chance because, in the end, his contempt built me too, and a god should honor his investors. As for the Celestial Court, the 9 immortal clans run the hidden world exactly as they always did, day to day. But there's a new order to things now. Twice a year, the elders convene, and the court sovereign and I preside together, and the business of the hidden world gets done. The elders are, to a one, exquisitely, painfully polite to me now. Not a single insult in an entire year, which the system finds hilarious. The most contemptuous beings in the world, and not one of them will risk a single sneer at you anymore, in case it makes you stronger. You've achieved the impossible, host. You've made arrogant people humble. Passive income? 0. You've priced yourself out of your own market. Congratulations, you monster. I laughed for about 5 minutes when that one popped up. There was, however, one last person who hadn't gotten the memo. Because the hidden world isn't just one country. Beyond the 9 clans of our celestial court, across the oceans, there are other courts, other apexes, other 1,000-year-old orders who consider themselves the true center of the world. And word of what had happened in the Cloudspire Mountains had traveled slowly to the Western Dominion, and when it arrived, the ruling council there had reacted exactly the way arrogant power always reacts to news of an upstart. They didn't believe it. And they were insulted by it, so they sent an envoy. His name was Lord Beaumont, a Tier 8 sovereign of the Western Dominion, and he arrived at a state gala Valeria and I were hosting in Arcadia, uninvited, radiating the kind of contempt I hadn't tasted in a full year. He strode into the ballroom, ignored the hundreds of guests, walked straight up to me, looked me up and down, and sneered. "So you're the mortal peasant who somehow bullied the Eastern Court into submission," he said, his voice ringing across the suddenly silent room. "I confess I don't see it. You have no bearing, no lineage, no presence worthy of the name. In the Western Dominion, we'd have used a creature like you to test our disciples' blades. The East has grown soft, kneeling to a jumped-up stray dog in a borrowed suit. I've come to correct their embarrassing little mistake. He raised his voice for the whole gala. Kneel, mongrel, and swear fealty to the Western Dominion, and I may let you keep your pathetic little mortal city as a vassal. Refuse, and I'll grind you and this whole gaudy pile of nouveau riche filth into paste. Ding, 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 ding. Fresh Tier 8 source, plus 5,000. Oh, it's been a while, hasn't it? Almost nostalgic. A ripple of horror went through the guests. Somewhere, a glass shattered. Valeria, beside me in a gown the color of midnight, didn't so much as blink. She simply took a slow sip of her wine and watched, because by now she knew exactly how this was going to go, and she was, frankly, looking forward to it. I set down my own glass, and I looked at Lord Beaumont, this proud, ancient, powerful being who had crossed an ocean to look down on me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a year. I felt the old, warm, delicious gratitude. You know, I said, I want to thank you, truly. You've traveled a very long way to be arrogant at me, and I'd almost forgotten how much I enjoy it. I stepped toward him, and Beaumont, who was a Tier 8 sovereign and had probably never stepped back from anyone in his life, took an involuntary step back, because his ancient instincts were screaming what his ancient pride refused to hear. Here's some free advice, one apex to another. Before you cross an ocean to insult a man, it's worth finding out why the last people who insulted him are so very, very careful never to do it again. You dare. Beaumont's aura flared, Tier 8 power crashing outward, guests screaming and scrambling back. I do, I said, and I let a single thread of what I was become visible. Just a thread, a sliver, a whisper of the thing that had no name, the stillness the 9 sovereigns of the Eastern Court had accidentally forged when they hit me with everything they had. The ballroom's chandeliers didn't shatter, the building didn't shake. It was quieter and infinitely more terrible than that. The air itself seemed to remember who it belonged to. Lord Beaumont's Tier 8 aura, the pride of the Western Dominion, guttered out like a candle in a hurricane, and the sovereign's legs folded, and he dropped to his knees on the ballroom floor. Not because I pushed him, but because in the presence of what I was, kneeling was simply the shape reality took. His eyes went wide, his mouth worked soundlessly. For the first time in his long, arrogant life, Lord Beaumont of the Western Dominion understood, in his bones, exactly how small he was. What are you, he choked. I'm the man your entire order is about to become very, very polite to, I said gently, crouching to his level, exactly as I'd once crouched to Grandmaster Steele. Go home, Lord Beaumont. Tell your council what you felt here tonight. Tell them the East didn't kneel to a stray dog. Tell them the East was simply wise enough to bow before the storm, and suggest, strongly, that the West learn to do the same. I patted his shoulder. And thank you again, sincerely. It really has been too long since anyone was brave enough to look down on me. I'd almost missed it. I let him up. He fled. Within the month, the Western Dominion sent a formal delegation, hats in hand, seeking a treaty. The court sovereign found the whole thing so funny she laughed for a week. And that, right there, was the moment I finally understood the full shape of what my gift had done to my life. Not the power, the peace. I had spent 2 weeks turning the world's contempt into a throne, and then a year turning that throne into something worth sitting on. And now, even the last arrogant apex on the far side of the world had learned the same lesson everyone learns eventually, in the end. The man you spit on might just be the man who eats it. So they stopped spitting. All of them. Forever. The wedding was 3 months after Beaumont. Valeria had said, a year earlier, high above the clouds, that a formal correction to the wife situation would be reputationally irresponsible. So we corrected it in the other direction instead. It was not a small affair. You do not marry the Queen of Arcadia quietly, and you certainly don't do it when half the guest list is composed of immortal elders who a year ago tried to erase you and are now, to a one, exquisitely, terrifyingly polite. The court sovereign herself officiated, galaxies in her eyes, clearly delighted to be doing something in 3,000 years that wasn't dreary, immortal politics. Grandmaster Steele stood among my guests, humbled and proud. Alice, the executive who'd called me a beggar in a borrowed suit on my very first day at the consortium and had since become one of my most trusted people, wept openly and denied it afterward. Even my father, Arthur, was there, in the very back, invited by Valeria over my objections, sitting alone and silent, watching the son he'd thrown away marry the most powerful woman in the world. I caught his eye once. He mouthed, "I'm sorry." I gave him a single small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was, maybe, the beginning of the possibility of it. Some doors you let close. A few, if the person suffered enough and changed enough, you leave open a crack. Julian was not invited, but I heard, later, that he'd stood at the mailroom window that day and watched the wedding motorcade pass on the street far below, and that he hadn't said a word, and that a coworker had found him there an hour after it had gone, still standing, still staring at nothing. I felt, when I heard it, not triumph, and not pity, but a kind of quiet closing. The account was settled. The books were balanced. I never thought about Julian Reed again. When Valeria and I said our vows, high in a hall of white jade with the whole hidden world as witness, I looked at her, and the system, which had been dormant for the better part of a year, chimed one last, soft time. This is the source now, not their hatred. Her hand in yours. Grow from this for the rest of your very, very long life. Goodbye, host. You never needed me. You just needed someone to bet on you once, without asking why, and she did. And then the panel faded for good, and I have never seen it since, and I have never once missed it. 3 years after the wedding, our daughter was born. We named her Clara, after my mother. The mother the original Ethan had lost, the mother Evelyn had murdered, the mother whose name I'd spoken in a coliseum in front of 10,000 people to unmake the woman who killed her. It felt right. It felt like closing a circle that had been open for far too long. Clara was, from the very first day, entirely unbothered by the fact that her parents were the two most powerful people in the world. Valeria, the Queen of Arcadia, a woman who had stared down immortal sovereigns without blinking, was rendered completely helpless by a baby who refused to sleep unless someone was singing to her, badly, at 3 in the morning. And I, a man who had caught the combined killing techniques of the 9 immortal clans in my bare hands, spent the better part of 2 years learning that there is no power in any court under any sky that can make a toddler eat a vegetable she has decided she hates. It was, without exaggeration, the happiest I had ever been. The court sovereign visited often, which caused no small amount of quiet panic among the immortal elders, who could not understand why the ageless ruler of the hidden world kept clearing her impossible schedule to sit on the floor of a mortal penthouse and play with a human infant. She would hold Clara in her galaxy-eyed gaze for long, thoughtful moments, and once, when Clara was about a year old, she said something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "She's going to be interesting, this one," the sovereign murmured, watching Clara stack blocks with fierce concentration. The daughter of the man who ate the world's contempt, and the woman who never gave any. She smiled, slow and unreadable. "I wonder what she'll grow from." I didn't ask what she meant. I think, somewhere deep down, I already knew, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Because there was one thing I never told anyone. Not Valeria, not the court, not even, fully, myself. On the night Clara was born, in the quiet of the delivery room, as I held my daughter for the very first time, and she wrapped one impossibly tiny hand around my finger, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. A chime. Soft, distant, almost apologetic. The faintest echo of a system I'd been certain had gone silent forever. Nothing to report. Standby mode, monitoring. A new host may one day require guidance. Not yet. But the mechanism remembers. Rest, Ethan. The story doesn't end with you. It never does. But that is a tale for another life. And then it was gone again, and I told myself I'd imagined it. The way you tell yourself a lot of things when you're holding your newborn daughter, and the world is, for once, perfectly, impossibly kind. I never mentioned it. Some doors you let close, and some you leave open just a crack, for the people who'll come after you to walk through when it's their turn. Whatever gift my daughter carries, whatever furnace the world tries to forge her in, she'll have something the original Ethan never had. Something I had to earn the hardest way there is. She'll have parents who look at her and see everything. She'll never have to be told she's worthless to learn how much she's worth. And if the world is ever foolish enough to try to grind and Clara Reed into the mud the way it once tried to grind me, well, the world made me out of its own cruelty once already. It would do well to remember how that turned out. And it would do very, very well not to find out what my daughter grows from. But that, as the system said, is a tale for another life. For now, there's this one. There's Valeria, who still calls me a fool with such tenderness, it feels like a vow. There's Clara, who thinks I'm the strongest man in the world, and is, for once, completely correct. There's a hidden world that runs on order and respect instead of contempt, because the one time it tried contempt, it built a god by accident and had to kneel. There's a mailroom clerk who was once a golden sun, and a prisoner who was once a queen, and an old grandmaster who found humility at the end of a shattered sword, and a court sovereign who found something new after 3,000 years of the same. There's all of it, the whole enormous, ridiculous, hard-won shape of a life that started in the mud of a courtyard, with a system chiming in a doormat's skull. People ask me, sometimes, the ones brave enough to ask, whether I'm angry about the years the world spent grinding me into the dirt. Whether I resent the 15 years the original Ethan spent as a doormat, weeping and apologizing and begging to be loved by people who'd already decided he was garbage. Whether it haunts me, the mud, the kneeling, the 10,000 voices screaming trash in a coliseum built to bury me. And the honest answer is, no, not even a little. Because here's the truth I understood, standing in the ruins of the celestial court with the whole world at my feet. The people who hate you are telling you something about themselves, not about you. Every insult Evelyn threw, every sneer of Julian's, every cruel little laugh from a ballroom full of elites, every ounce of contempt from 300 immortals and one arrogant sovereign from across the sea, none of it was ever the truth about me. It was the truth about them. It was the shape of their own smallness, the fear that made them need someone beneath them to feel tall. They looked down on me because looking down was the only way they knew how to feel high. And that's the joke at the center of the whole thing, the joke my gift understood before I did. Contempt is a confession. Every person who spits on someone weaker is confessing, out loud, that they don't have the strength to build themselves up, so they have to tear someone else down instead. My system just took that confession and made it literal. It took every ounce of my enemy's smallness and converted it, one-to-one, into my greatness. They built me out of their own weakness, brick by brick, insult by insult. And they never understood, not one of them, until it was far too late, that the whole time they thought they were burying me, they were only ever digging the foundation of my throne. So no, I'm not angry. How could I be? I owe everything to the people who hated me. They were my forge. And the ones who mattered, the one who mattered, never hated me at all. She just dug me out of a mountain and asked for nothing, and then bet her whole empire on a man the world called trash. That's the part of the story I'd carve into the sky if I could. Not the power, not the throne, her. These days, I don't cultivate anymore, not the way I used to. There's nowhere left to climb. I sit at the absolute peak of a world that once agreed I was worthless, and there is no being in any court on any continent who would dare, anymore, to look down on me. The system was right, in the end, in that dry, funny way it had. I priced myself out of my own market. I made the arrogant humble. I turned the entire hidden world into a place where the strongest are the most careful never to sneer, just in case. If you think about it, that might be the greatest thing my gift ever did. Not making me a god, making a cruel world just a little bit kinder out of sheer self-preservation. Valeria and I rule together, beside the court sovereign, and one day, when she finally lays this tired world down, it will be ours to guard. And I intend to guard it well, because I remember, better than anyone alive, exactly what it feels like to be the smallest person in the room. To kneel in the mud while everyone laughs. To be told by everyone every day that you are nothing. I remember it, and I will spend my very long life making sure the world I rule is one where the boy kneeling in the mud gets a hand up instead of a boot. But I'd be lying if I told you I lost the taste for it entirely. Because every so often still, someone new arrives who hasn't heard the story. Some proud young heir, some fresh-faced envoy from a distant court, some arrogant fool who takes one look at me, quiet and unassuming in a simple suit beside my wife, and mistakes stillness for weakness. And they sneer, and they call me something small, and deep in my chest, where a system used to live, I feel the faint, warm, phantom echo of a chime that no longer sounds. And I have to fight, every single time, to keep the delighted grin off my face. Because a part of me, the part that will always be the trash they knelt in the mud, the part that learned to smile while the whole world spit, will always, always love it. So here I am, at the top of everything, married to the queen who saw me when I was nothing, owed a debt by a hidden world that spent 1,000 years believing it was untouchable, right up until the day it built a god out of its own cruelty and had to kneel to. The result. And if there's anyone left out there, anywhere, in any court, under any sky, who still thinks I'm beneath them, who still wants to look down their nose at the gutter-born stray dog who took the whole world without a master, without a lineage, without permission, then I have exactly one thing left to say to you. The same thing I said kneeling in the mud on the very first day, with my whole clan laughing above me and a system chiming in my skull. The same thing I said to a coliseum of 10,000 and a court of 300 immortals, and an ocean's worth of apex arrogance, every single one of whom learned the hard way that I meant it. Go ahead, spit on me, sneer at me, call me trash, one more time, as loud as you like, in front of as many people as you can gather. I'll be standing right here at the top of the world, holding my wife's hand, smiling that same infuriating little smile, ready to turn your last shred of arrogance into one more inch of the throne you built for me without ever meaning to. So please, from the absolute bottom of my soul, with all the gratitude of a god who is forged in a furnace of your own making, don't stop.